I'm going to call the meeting to order. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, May 11 meeting of the Westport Select Board. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, this meeting is being recorded. I have just a few announcements. First, I wanted to thank some people for some events that happened recently. We had the Abner Brownell, Westport's Paul Revere reenactment that happened recently. Even despite the rain, we didn't get a real horse, but we got an artificial horse. So thank you to the Westport MA 250 committee for putting that on. I want to call out, there's a lot of recreation department programs going on. We have some people talking about recreation. The note that I had specifically in my packet was reminding me about the shell art that happened, but there's a lot of programs for adults and for young people coming up. So go check out Westport Recreation's webpage. And then I just want to acknowledge the 237 people that attended town meeting this year. That was on Tuesday, May 5th. It was about a 3-hour-long meeting. We got everything accomplished that we were trying to accomplish. So I want to thank the moderator for his second town meeting. I want to thank the town clerk and the poll workers and the police department that was there to just make everything went smoothly. So thanks to all who attended. We do have a couple of events coming up. Our next meeting is not until June 1. This is a 3-week gap to accommodate the Memorial Day holiday. So our next meeting is June 1. But between now and then, we have the Tough Kids Challenge is coming up this weekend. I don't know where you find information about that, but I'm sure go online, look for the Tough Kids Challenge. And then a reminder that on May 30th, we're starting off the summer farmers markets. But really what I wanted to do, the big events that we're going to have in town is our Memorial Day commemoration. So I'm going to invite Carol Freitas up to tell us what's going on for that.
Good evening, everybody. Is this on? Yes. So we have several events coming up. This Saturday, the 16th, we're going to be flagging the 3 large cemeteries, Maple Grove, Linden Grove, and Beech Grove. Maple Grove and Linden Grove will be at 9 in the morning, and then Beech Grove will be at 10 in the morning. So if anybody is interested in volunteering, I could use the help. And then on May 23rd is our annual wreath laying ceremonies. So that starts at 9 o'clock at the VFW on Route 6. And then at 9:15, we go to the American Legion on Sanford Road. From there, we go to Latessa Square at 9:30. And then we go to Fontaine Bridge on Route 88 at 10. And then we finish up at Westport Point at 10:15. So we'll be done by about 10:30. And at each location, we have a little ceremony with a rifle salute, placing of a wreath, a prayer, and the playing of taps. And then on Monday, May 25th, is Memorial Day. So weather permitting, we will have our ceremony, which steps off from the parking lot right here at 9:30. So anybody who wishes to be in the parade should be here no later than 9 a.m. We will start with a little ceremony outside at 9:30 and then proceed down to Beech Grove Cemetery and have a ceremony there at 10 o'clock. If the weather does not cooperate, then we will move the ceremony indoors, and we will cancel the parade. So if we do move it indoors, it will be at the Town Hall Annex Gym at 10 a.m. And I will post updates on both the Veteran Services page of the town's website and also the Westport VSO Facebook page. Thank you.
So Saturday, May 23rd in the morning, there's a series of, stay there because I'm going to bump your agenda item. So Saturday, May 23rd, starting at 9 o'clock, is visiting the different memorials around town. And then on Monday, May 25th, 9 o'clock, if you want to participate in the parade, we'll have a ceremony, and then 10 a.m. At the cemetery if the weather is good, and at the annex if it's not.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
I want to, just because you're here, I was just going to bump up your action item. So we're going to switch to action item 5D. So 5D is a request from the Veteran Service Officer to accept a $50 donation from Deborah and Adelino Maderos for flag markers for veterans' graves and to discuss the activities, which you just did. Carol can't take donations directly, so we have to accept the donations that are made to her department. Did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
So I just wanted to say the flag markers are the round thermoplastic markers that identify veterans' graves. It says U.S. veteran on it. Years ago, we received about $6,500 in donations, and I bought a lot of grave markers, but they get broken over time, so I do need to replenish them, and I think I have about $1,500 left in that account. So this is a little bit will help, and I'm hoping to get some more, probably not in time for this Memorial Day, but for next Memorial Day, so we can have brand-new grave markers at the approximately 1,300 veterans' graves here in Westport.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the donation?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Thank you, Carol. Anything else, Carol?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Did I miss any acknowledgements or recognitions that I should have covered? I know I skipped ahead. Okay. So the next item we have on the agenda is a public hearing. We have a request from Nokichoke River LLC for a 6-month seasonal trailer permit for recreational purposes to locate a trailer at 109 East Beach Road. The property is shown on Assessor's Map 76A, Lot 34. Do we have all the paperwork in order for that?
Good evening. Yes, we do.
We do. All right. Is there anybody here to talk about that?
Madam Chair and board members, John Gifford representing Nokichoke River. It's a lot that I purchased last year. It's my first year, so I understand there has to be a hearing on it, and here I am.
Okay. And you understand the conditions, you have to be out by a certain time, you can't can't leave stuff there, all the good rules that we have around that?
I've seen them all.
Okay. All right. Any questions?
No, motion to approve. Second. Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Enjoy the walk. See you, Jen.
Okay.
We have a request from the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation to hold their annual Cycle of Life ride on Saturday, September 19, with a rain date of Sunday, September 20. Do we have a recommendation on this?
We do. So within your packet, you do have recommended police details at the key intersections, but overall, support the event, recommend approval.
Is there any discussion?
I'll move the event, Madam Chair. Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. We have a request from the Buzzards Bay Coalition to hold their annual Buzzards Bay Watershed Ride on October 4, 2026. And do we have all that paperwork in order?
Yes, we do. We're expecting between 300 and 400 participants. Police, again, recommend approval and suggest traffic support at key intersections, plus they ask that the volunteers wear safety vests.
Is there anyone here for that? No. Okay,
I recommend approval, subject to all the conditions that the police department have placed on the event.
Second.
is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. We have the self-nomination form for the Southeastern Massachusetts Metropolitan Planning Organization, SMMPO. Chris, can you tell us about this?
Sure. So Serpent is asking if any board member is interested in serving on the SMMPO, which helps decide regional transportation priorities and funding. There are 2 seats up for election in June 2026. And if any of our board members are interested, it's a self-nomination form that has to be back by June 15th.
All right, thank you. Anybody want to nominate themselves for that? No? Okay. Well, if you do, talk to Chris. Okay. We have a request from Zoning Board of Appeals Chair Roger Menard to accept the resignation of Constance Ski. Anybody, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Can I say something first?
Okay, Mr. Menard?
I just want to say, Constance has been a valuable member of the zoning board for more than 10 years, right? 10 years. She's been very dedicated. I can't say enough about her, and I think she should be commended for her service, and I support anything that, any decision that she makes.
Thank you. Ms. Gee?
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to say that I have really enjoyed serving on this board. It's been incredibly educational. You learn so much about the town from so many different angles, and Roger's just a remarkable chair. So it's been a true honor for me. I really appreciate it. I would like to leave the Board of Selectmen with one heartfelt recommendation that I think would be very, very helpful for this town, and that is that we desperately need a second building inspector in Westport. It's just too much for one person to handle. We've got so much development going on.
Thank you.
I move to accept Ms. Gee's resignation with regret.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. That's unanimous. Then we have a request from the Zoning Board of Appeals Chair Roger Menard to reappoint the following regular members: George Stelgis, Janice Day, and Kevin McGough. You just want us to reappoint them?
I'll say a little
Okay, go ahead. You have to go to the mic.
These three members, we're really fortunate to have. It is a very diverse group, and I'm sure that everybody that's on any committee knows that having a diverse set of opinions is really important, and I certainly support the continuation of these three members.
And does that still leave you with an opening then, with Ms. Gee's
Well,
resignation?
with Constance resignation now, she is a regular member. I'm going to poll the two alternates to see if one of them would like to serve out the rest of Constance's term. I think you have a couple of years left. So that'll be coming up at the next meeting, and then hopefully we'll get back to you, and hopefully either Janice or Kevin will agree to become a permanent member, and then we'll be looking for an additional alternate.
Okay, thank you. All right, so what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. We have a request from Dana Stewart, Recreation Director. Dana's not here yet, but Andrea Dunbar is here, representing the Recreation Commission. So we have a request to appoint the following lifeguards for the 2026 season. Everything okay over here? Michael Crotow, sorry, Michael. Daniel Barnes, Leonardo Hatchem, Coltrane McGonigal, Brandon Medeiros, Luke Medeiros, Avery Viveros, Anton A.J. Boxler, Marcus Dutra-Africano, Elijah McGonigal, Philip Bromage, and A.J. Andrew Pickering Jr.
I moved that first of all, I want to declare a conflict of interest and will remove myself from the discussion and the vote.
Motion to approve. Second.
Is there any discussion? Did you want to say anything about the
Yeah, I
lifeguards?
just wanted to, Andrea Dunbar, on behalf of the Recreation Director, Dana Stewart, I'm the Chair of the Recreation Commission. I just wanted to report to the board that the majority of the guards that are coming on are returning from last year. There is one new hire, Andrew Pickering Jr. There will be 12 total lifeguards this summer. All of their paperwork has been completed and their Cory checks have been done. There will be a pre-service lifeguard training at the beginning of the summer that will be run by Dana and Michael Croto, the head guard. The lifeguards will be out on the beach starting on June 13th through Labor Day weekend.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we had a motion, a second, right? Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so that's 4 in favor and 1 abstain. We have a request from the Director of Marine Services, Bill Chase. He's got several on here, Captain. We have a request to appoint Aidan Holliard to Assistant Harbor Master.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. I did not get Aiden's, there he is. I didn't know if you were going to make it. I didn't get Aiden's name on the agenda in time. Aiden is a second-year student at Mass Maritime Academy. Rick and I interviewed him. He was a very impressive young man. We actually thought he might be military. This kid was pretty squared away. Anyway, he was kind of a late addition, but we're putting his name forward for approval as an assistant harbor master for the 2026 season, and we hope beyond.
All right, thank you. It's the pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Then we have a request for a proclamation supporting National Safe Boating Week.
Yeah, so this is, Rick brought this to my attention. I didn't even see this one coming. You want to talk about this one?
Sure. Thank you, Director. Safe Boating Week is a national program that takes effect the 16th to the 22nd, and it is basically a PSA, a social media type program where we want to get the word out on safe boating, wearing your life jackets, how to navigate courses, sobriety and whatnot. So we have a full course of things that will be on social media to promote safe boating. Biggest thing that we're interested in right now is life jackets, making sure that people wear them and wear them properly. So it is our hope that the proclamation will, bring it to the forefront of the community.
All right, great. Did we get is there a proclamation document or anything?
So we do not have draft language before us this evening, but if the board is in support following the vote tonight, I'm happy to work with them on coming up with that language.
Okay. All right, any questions? What's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You got your proclamation? We'll sign it when we have something to sign. We have a request to hang a banner promoting Shell Stock 2026.
Yeah, so Shell Shock is going to happen on the 15th of August this summer from 3 till about 7. We didn't do it last year. We had some scheduling conflicts and we couldn't make it happen. Basically, if you don't know, what Shell Stock does is it raises money for shellfish propagation activities within the river, and it enhances all the other monies that we bring in. In 2024, when this went off, we raised about $31,000 in change, so this is a big deal for us. The big difference this year compared to previous years, Shell Stock has basically been a group of well-meaning volunteers. This year is a 501c3, so if any of you have any mad money left over and you need a little tax deduction, give us a call. So we're asking for the banner to be hung up hopefully 2 weeks prior to the event. I don't know what that typically is. You put it up for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't know. But I've been tasked by the committee to ask for permission to hang it.
All right, so we have lots of banners going up over the summer, so you have to coordinate with Carlos specifically when they'll go up or down. But anything on that?
So I never heard of Shell Stock. What takes place at Shell Stock? Because it sounds like a good time.
So we've got Roomful of Blues coming in for entertainment. This happens over at the fairgrounds on Pine Hill Road. It's a big social event. To me, it's anybody who's anybody in Westport shows up for this one.
My
But it's-
daughter's favorite event is the Buck-a-Shuck Oysters,
I'll be
which
there
I'm
then.
sure she'll hoping that you'll continue.
By the way, we're looking for some volunteers to shuck quahogs. If you have that skill,
You had how to shock?
I do.
Line them up.
There you go.
can you?
Yeah, Shuck very
Okay,
well.
there's another one, Rick. We go, okay. Anyway, so that's pretty much what it is. It's a great time. It's just, it's the purest form of Westport, short of the Westport Fair, I think.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And apparently you're volunteering. This is about you. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous.
We'll supply the apron, Rick, you're covered.
And we have a request for final approval of the sites for the oyster restoration projects. You wanna-
Okay,
this is-
I'm going to step out and let Dan, is Dan here? I didn't see him. Oh, he didn't make it, okay. Rick and Dan have been working on this project, so Rick is the better man to speak to about this. If I could just throw in one little ditty before we carry on. Wednesday at Spindle Rock Club, we're doing a joint oil spill exercise with Dartmouth, so it's Dartmouth, Westport, it's the Coast Guard, it's DEP, Westport Fire, Dartmouth Fire, everybody in between, so we're going to actually do an oil spill drill in that. And so if any of you are interested in coming, I've been asked to ask all of you to attend.
And the public
So-
should not be alarmed that this is a drill on the 13th.
Well, that's why it's happening on May 13th, because the river is still relatively empty right now. So before we wrap up this boom amongst all the moorings, this is a great time to try it, so.
All right, oyster restoration.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure everyone remembers we were here about half a dozen months ago to talk about this oyster program and rebuilding and restoration of the reefs on the river for the benefit of the fishery as well as the river and the health of the river. We were fortunate enough to get your blessing to move forward. We have been moving forward with the Department of Marine Fisheries as well as the Nature Conservancy to build oyster reefs within the Westport River. And on the slide up there, you will see the reefs that we have been working with. The Marine Services Division, as well as Shellfish and TNC and Marine Fisheries, have spent a lot of time up there trying to figure out where the best place for oyster reefs would be to regenerate the oyster fishery, which is pretty much dying within the West, or has died within the Westport River. Just last week, we were out with the Marine Fisheries divers. We went down on Odova on all those sites. Those substrate is perfect for reefs. They are not in navigable channels. They're out of the way. If you look starting from the top in the northeast corner of the river, opposite as you come down from Hicks Bridge is the first one, then the next one's in the Cove. The next one is just below Lakes Island as you make the turn around the tip there of Cadman's Neck, and then you go around to the right in Cadman's Neck, inside Cadman's Cove, excuse me. And what we did was we moved down to Upper Spectacle and Lower Spectacle, and we put small sites in there, which are out of the way of pretty much everything. And one of the things that we took into effect there is a lot of people recreate on those two islands, and we wanted to make sure that we were further off on good soil to generate these oyster reefs. So we pretty much finalized them in our mind on where they should be. We've talked to the shell fishing community. We've talked to just about everybody, including the residents along Cadman's Neck, who have given us their support. So we're hoping that we will get the nod tonight to move forward and start to build these reefs out. I think it's important, we all think it's important, including the Watershed Alliance and many others in town, that we launched this program, which basically is only costing the town in kind time and/or money. Basically, it's our labor once in a great while to go up and inspect the sites and make sure that they haven't been fouled by either boats, vandalism, or anything else that might cause problems up there. Our patrols are up there all the time anyway, both shellfish and harbor masters. When I'm doing shellfish work, I'm up there every day. So we keep an eye on them, and we're hoping that the board will give us a blessing to move on and continue on with this project.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
And they'll be clearly marked to prevent any harvesting prior to when they're ready.
Yes, they will. We're going to set buoys out. There'll be yellow buoys that are set out. In fact, if you go up there now, there's yellow buoys up there, just that we have gauges in the water now. We have some equipment up there. So you'll see yellow buoys that will clearly mark out the areas.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Anything else? Get your waterways permits in.
Yeah, that's going pretty well, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I won't burden you with the time involved in that discussion, but it's going
Okay.
quite well. So,
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have a request from Jennifer Bellimer, sorry, Jennifer, for approval to operate a summer program at the Cottamonk Nursery School during the summer months, June, July, and August. Chris, do you want to tell us about this?
Certainly. So as the board knows, we have a nursery school that is located within the Town Hall Annex. The school has historically operated in line with the school year, so September to the spring. This year, that's changing a little bit, where we do have Cottamonk proposing a summer program. Now, during the summer, it is pretty busy over our annex, and so wanted to have the conversation with the board to make the board aware of it. The other thing is this is an expansion of their program outside of what has been their normal operating hours. So just wanted to update the board this evening and get your sign off.
All right, thank you. And I think we asked the Recreation Commission to weigh in.
Yes. Again, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Andrea Dunbar, Chair of the Recreation Commission, on behalf of Dana Stewart here tonight. The Recreation Department holds day camps in the Annex Gym throughout the summer from about 8:30 a.m. setup, camp from 9 to 3, and then clean up until 3:30. We also have some late afternoon and evening programs and events. We also have gym rentals in the evenings and on the weekends. The camp programs and the gym rentals make up the Recreation Department's revenue that help the department run effectively. Recreation Director Dana Stewart has spoken with the owner of Cottimunk Nursery School, Jennifer Belhumer, and they have come to an understanding to hopefully make it work for both parties over the summer months. The understanding between the Recreation Department and Cottimunk is as follows. Cottimunk would not be able to use the gym during the summer months, but would use the playground or park space for active play, or use their classroom space if there's rain. The gym bathrooms would be shared with the camps and Cottimunk. The use of an orange cone or curtain will be an indicator for the camps if Cottimunk is using the bathrooms, and they would try to wait their turn until Cottimunk is done. The outside playground and park spaces will be used by both the Recreation Department and Cottimunk, as well as the general public, as they are open recreation spaces for all. To the extent that the board would like this information in a written document to add as an addendum to the lease, we can certainly provide that as well.
Chris, do you have a recommendation?
No, again, this was not something that was specifically laid out within the lease. The language was pretty vague when it came to this subject. I feel comfortable that the conversation has been had between Cottimunk and our Recreation Department, so recommend approval.
I think, though, I would be comfortable if we recommended, I'll recommend approval subject to implementation of an MOU.
The MOU to the effect of what she just said?
Yes.
I'm going to recluse myself from this.
Okay.
A second, Madam Chair.
All right. Is there any discussion?
One note on that for the MOU. Is that something that the board wants back, or does the board want me to work out the details that were discussed and sign on behalf of the board?
I'm happy with, as maker of the motion, I'm happy with it, what you propose, that you would do it.
Do you want to authorize him to sign the MOU as part of your proposal, or part of your motion?
Why not?
Okay. I'm just asking. You made the motion.
No, I mean, I like when you change relationships or create some new dimensions to it, it's always good to put it in writing. And so if there's anybody leaves or positions change, that it's understood.
Who seconded that? Was it you?
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so that's 4 in favor and 1 abstain. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Ross Moran did not have to wait more than half an hour today. For those of you who are not familiar with Ross, he frequently has to wait hours before he gets here. We have a request from Ross Moran, the Westport Land Conservation Trust, to approve 2 conservation restrictions, conveyance of an approximate 34-acre conservation restriction located at 585 Main Road from Land Conservation Trust to Buzzards Bay Coalition, and conveyance of an approximate 52 acres conservation restriction known as Greenwood Park, Assessor's Plot 6, Lot 6, from the Buzzards Bay Coalition to Westport Land Conservation Trust. So you're swapping some conservation restrictions. You want to tell us what's going on here?
Got it. Thank you, Madam Chair. So Ross Moran, Executive Director of the Westport Land Trust. Last year, both of our organizations purchased 2 different parcels in town. I'll speak first about the parcel we purchased. It's 34 acres off of Main Road to preserve a tributary of Snell Creek, provide some additional public access, about a new mile-long trail. For those who don't, if you're trying to think about where this is located on Main Road, it's north of Lee's, just north of Potter's, which is on the east side. This is on the west side, and there's a little field over there that agriculture has been happening in for quite some time. To retain the agricultural component of the project, we are entering into a really cool partnership with the Westport Food Pantry. This past spring, we actually planted about 1,000 blueberries, raspberries, and blackberry plants that'll be harvested by the food pantry 2 or 3 years from now for distribution locally. So this property is meant to kind of check all the boxes of what we love to preserve here in town. So we are conveying a conservation restriction to the Buzzards Bay Coalition as a requirement of a state grant to receive some funding for the project. In this case, the CR, the conservation restriction, does not include any interest from the town of Westport, just approval by the select board.
And then what's the second part?
So the second one is a separate conservation restriction. It's on a 52-acre, 2 parcels up in the north end of town that are at the headwaters of Bread and Cheese Brook. They have quite a bit of wetland that feeds into Bread and Cheese Brook up there. It's a really important part of the brook. Bread and Cheese is one of the tributaries that then leads into the East Branch and is considered a cold water fishery resource here in town. The land also, from a historical component, used to be an old mill pond. It's a really beautiful property up there. Both of these conservation restrictions guarantee public access in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you. Do you have questions or comments? So these are existing conservation restrictions, they're just switching who has the restriction?
Yeah, so we own the 34-acre parcel. The Buzzards Bay Coalition owns the 52-acre, and then we're granting each other conservation restrictions and seeking your approval of the select board as required by MGL for those restrictions.
Thank you. Question?
Do we need to vote on each one independently?
Do we need to vote them independently?
I would.
Okay. Go ahead.
Motion to approve the first one, which is the conveyance of 34 acres from Westport Land Conservation Trust to Buzzards Bay Coalition.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Motion to approve the second, conveyance of an approximately 52 acres from the Buzzards Bay Coalition to Westport Land Conservation Trust.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous.
Thank you
Anything
very
else
much.
going on, Vaughn?
We have lots of stuff going
Okay.
You know, we have some additional land preservation projects right now. We have a really exciting one off of Drift Road that the Community Preservation Committee is supporting. It's the preservation of the former Peaceful Acres Orchard on Drift Road, which we hope to also use as a place to tell the story of the many small farm families in town. So we'll be doing some historic interpretation there. We hope to close on that later in the year. And we are always working with the Recreation Department and others across town to host programs. So, you know, come join us for something fun and connect with the land.
All right, thank you. If it's okay with the board, I'm going to bump up the Barrier Beach Plan update. Do we have everybody here for that? All right, so we're going to go to 6A, the Barrier Beach Plan update. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Burris, the town planner in Westport, and with me I have Justine Rooney from Woods Hole Group. She's a coastal scientist and planner who's been helping us out with this project. And before she gets into her segment of the presentation, since we do have a new select board member, Selectman Mundy, I just wanted to go over some background of this project. So in 2023 and 2024, there were a couple of significant overwash events at East Beach and some of the other barrier beaches, and these were pretty expensive to clean up. They were about $150,000 in labor and materials, and it took several days for the highway department to clean up that overwash. And a portion of the road was also destroyed as well, which was subsequently rebuilt. But in light of what had happened, then the select board had asked the planning board to look into what kinds of grant funding we can secure to start to, plan for these types of scenarios. So the planning board applied for a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant and 2 coastal zone management grants over the last 2 years that were awarded. We do have 2 of our funders here, Coastal Zone Management. They're available if you have any questions for them now or later. But after we secured those grants, we started drafting the beach management plans for East Beach, Beach Avenue, and Atlantic Avenue. The purpose of these plans is to outline recommended management practices, permitting and regulatory obligations. And then we'll use those plans as a basis for state and local permitting for manipulating material in those locations. And so one important caveat I just want to note is that these plans will only apply to public lands. They do not apply to private property. And also, for you all, there was one thing that we had proposed and had talked with various select board members about, which was the splitting of material on East Beach Road. And that's something that we have decided to not move forward with. However, we would like to talk to you, or we decided not move forward with it along the private property of East Beach. We would like to talk to you about allowing the natural processes to play out on the town parking area and the town beach area. But that's something that we can, Justine can talk a little bit more about. So Justine, what she's going to do here tonight is give you an overview of the plan, changes to date, as I had mentioned, some of the changes we have made. And then after tonight, we're going to start to finalize the plan in anticipation of asking the board at a future meeting to file a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission. So I'll turn it over to Justine.
Okay. You can go to the next slide. So I know we've talked with a few of you before, but just especially for the public listening, if they haven't seen the project before, this is looking at the ocean-facing barrier beaches in Westport, and that's along Atlantic Avenue, Beach Avenue, and East Beach Road. Some of the public have brought up that Cherry and Webb was not included in this planning process, and we have noted that that could be something that is taken on in future. You could use the beach management plan developed during this process and carried into Cherry and Webb as well. So that's not included because there's not a public road along that barrier beach section. So it's just those 3 public roadways and the ocean-facing sections of the barrier beach. These areas are dynamic systems, and they buffer inland areas such as town roadways from coastal storms and flooding. They provide essential habitat for protected wildlife, and they support public access and recreation. Next slide, please. One thing, and Michael kind of already went into this, but when we looked at this planning process, we went into a comprehensive look of 4 key components. 1, how are Westport's barrier beaches used by the public? 2, how are the barrier beaches naturally responding during storm events? 3, what management practices were currently being taken on by or utilized by the town of Westport? And then 4, what management practices would best support the long-term integrity of the barrier beaches while aligning with the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act and the Coastal Manual? So by examining all of these elements together, we felt that we were able to develop a set of best management practices tailored to balance public use with the coastal resilience along Westport's barrier beaches. These management practices are grounded in an understanding of how these barrier systems work and function, particularly during storms, and they're designed to work with, not against, those natural processes. So as Michael just mentioned, the barrier beaches will serve as a basis for the order of conditions that will govern how these areas are managed. So there are things in the beach management plan that are bylaws, such as the dog policy, which are already included, and then there are certain practices which include the manipulation of material. Those need to have an order of conditions aligned with their work. Next slide, please. So the select board's key roles in our mind are input and authorization of the barrier beach management plan. We're not asking for that today. We just wanted an opportunity to come talk to you about the plan, any potential bylaw changes that could come up as a part of the planning process, input on grant funding pursuits, and allocation of town funds for day-to-day management or long-term adaptation. So we're really here just for input today. Next slide, please. As Michael mentioned, we put out a draft of the plan in January, and there was public feedback that we documented. As a result of that public feedback, the plan maintains the practice of returning the overwash material to the ocean or southern side of the East Beach roadway layout as the policy currently stands. You can see along, I know it's small, but I did my best to show the breakup. You can see that yellow section along the roadway, along the north and south side of that section of East Beach Road, with the exception of a small parcel along the very western side of the road. That's private property that abuts either side of the roadway. So the language has been updated in the plan to clarify that redistribution of material to the north side will not be required. One thing that we do think is important is that if material washes on to properties along the north side of the road, it should not be taken off of the north and returned to the south. So really, when we're looking at the town's practice, we're talking about what's happening within the roadway layout. But in order to work with the coastal processes, material should be left if it washes onto parcels on the north side. Retaining material on the north side of the road supports the natural landward migration and long-term integrity of the barrier beach. This barrier beach naturally wants to shift, and it wants to move, and it wants to roll over itself, and allowing some of that material to wash onto the north side of the roadway layout is important in terms of allowing the elevation of that side of the roadway to increase, especially as sea level rise changes.
And so what Justine is describing with pushing the material to the south side of the road, that's actually consistent with the select board's current interim management policy. What she is talking about for the other end of the beach where there's public property, that's where there would be a modification of that policy.
Yeah, next slide, please. We can actually take a look at that. So now you can see in pink, again, very small, but along the publicly owned eastern section of the roadway, we would propose that the overwash is, when it's distributed along the entire width of the roadway, that the highway department would split the material down the middle of the roadway, placing a portion seaward and a portion landward to support the natural migration of the barrier beach system. This practice would be implemented by the town as it's reflected as it reflects current Commonwealth recommended best management practices. So part of this work was working with coastal zone management and getting their input on what the best management practices would be at this site based on the wetlands regulations and the coastal manual, and this was what was part of the recommendations. Next slide. One other thing we had talked about is we just wanted to point out some of the other major feedback we got, just so that the select board was aware. One is that we really want to make it clear that the plan does not create new regulatory authority over private property. That was feedback that we got, and we wanted to make sure that that's documented. We worked to go through the plan and as much as possible highlight that fact more so that it's more clear. Activities on private land continue to be governed by local and state and federal regulations, including permitting requirements under the Wetland Protection Act and the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act and others. The plan rather provides guidance and best management practices. We hope that it improves coordination and clarifies expectations for various municipal departments. It does not override property rights or impose new restrictions beyond those already established through existing regulations. Next slide. Some of the other major feedback we got was that, again, the public felt that we needed to better distinguish between private and public jurisdiction, so language has been added. The plan does not impose any new restrictions on the use of grills or fire pits on private property. That was something that was brought up. And the plan does not impose new restrictions on dogs on private property. Clarifying language has been added to ensure a clear distinction between public and private applicability. Next slide. So one thing I wanted to add is that, we will have a version ready to post a new version of the beach management plan that reflects all these changes. There have been other changes. For example, Chris had made a recommendation to turn the recommendation section or chapter into a table and add a bit more detail, so we've done that. We're extremely grateful for all of the feedback we've gotten. We think it's helped to make a better plan, and so we appreciate the public for their input. But we wanted to talk a little bit more about that change since the last draft plan and like Michael said, some of our next steps will be filing a notice of intent with the Westport Conservation Commission, and that will also include a Massachusetts Endangered Species Act project review with Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program. We will ask at a future meeting for the select board's approval to file that notice of intent. And then following incorporation of comments from Mass DEP and Natural Heritage, we would seek a select board endorsement of the final Berry Beach Management Plan. So we would come back to you after we've gotten feedback from the Commonwealth level review of that NOI application.
Yeah, I think, and one additional thing that's going to occur between now and when we approach you next, which will probably be at the next select board meeting for that authorization to move forward with the notice of intent, we are going to have a virtual public meeting to have a similar sort of discussion as we're doing here tonight, to just talk about what has changed in the plan. That'll be on May 20th at 6 p.m. It'll be a virtual meeting, so that way if there are folks who, still haven't made their way up here from some of the, particularly from East Beach, with there being a lot of seasonal residents, if folks haven't made their way up here for the summer, they can attend that.
Thank you. So I know I've had the pleasure of meeting with many people, including a bunch of geologists, to have like the 2-hour version of this meeting. So I know that I've learned a lot. I appreciate the incorporation of a lot of the feedback you got. I know we worked really hard with the property owners down there about where the highway department is moving the sand. I'm glad you were able to find kind of a middle ground here without having to go into the whole geological explanation why it's actually better to put the sand on the north side of the road. I appreciate that you were flexible in that. Gentlemen, any questions, comments?
I think it's been mentioned a half dozen times, but there's been a dialogue with the East Beach Neighborhood Association throughout this whole process.
Yes, we had this, so this project has been going on for about 2 years, and so in an earlier phase, we had a dedicated meeting just to communicate the results for East Beach. We actually did a series of meetings where we had them segmented by location in the plan. And they're going to receive, I actually just talked to Kevin Kurt, when was that, on Friday? And he's the president of the East Beach Improvement Association, to let him know that this next meeting is upcoming on the 20th.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, they've been very involved in the process so far.
I'd like to echo the sentiments of Madam Chair with respect to the private property rights and the public. Obviously, the policy that the chair and others prior to my time put in on the select board for distribution of materials, I think this shows a great balance between, obviously, the public sector and the private sector, and coming to a solution that I think everyone is agreeable on. I know this can always get contentious, but I appreciate Michael and Chris Capone and others who have had the meetings and set those meetings up and come to something that I think everyone can live with, so thank you.
Yeah, I do think it's important to note, though, just so the select board is aware, Mass DEP will review the policy, and they will weigh in on whether or not they feel like it is permittable under the Wetlands Protection Act. So we will come back with any feedback that we receive from Mass DEP.
I do a good job blaming the state for stuff, so I'll be happy to do that.
I was curious as to, as you know, there are 2 agreements in place regarding a settlement in 2023 involving previous concerns, and that had to do more with permitting. And then also we have a policy agreed to by the select board talking about the cobble and where it goes. Is there anything in this plan that runs afoul of those agreements as you see it now?
That's a great question. I think one part of the plan that got a little confusing for the public, and hopefully the recommendation that Chris made helped clarify that a bit more, is we had some recommendations that the town could move forward with in the future if they wanted to. So we had those recommendations in the plan, and I think there was some confusion on those changes happening right now as a part of the planning process. We just were documenting throughout our planning experience of feedback or things that we heard that could be taken on in the future. So there's nothing in this plan that speaks to the removal of sheds or decks along East Beach, which is in that 2023 settlement. This is really looking at that sediment when it washes onto there's more than just this one policy, but really when that sediment washes onto the roadway, whose job is it to move it? Who are we calling? When are we calling them? And where is it getting moved to? It seems like in the past there needed to be a little more clarification on roles and responsibilities. So the intention of the plan really was to provide a little more communication. And one nice thing about the notice of intent filing is it will really clearly lay out whose role and how the process will be done. So we can also distribute that to the highway department so they have a document that they can look to if they hire new staff or they have any turnover, that they have a document that they can give someone and say, this is exactly what our policy is. So there's no confusion on how it's done based on who's driving the equipment on a given day.
The plan does acknowledge that there are different permitting paradigms at play here. So for example, there's FEMA floodplain regulations that have to be adhered to in this location. Obviously the Wetlands Protection Act, but the plan, those are kind of separate buckets, separate regulatory buckets that this plan, while acknowledging them, does not say, the town should do X, Y, and Z in these locations. Those are separate conversations the town would have to have. Because in the agreement, there is some language in there that exempts, or it says that the town, if you get an order from, a federal regulatory agency, you have to move, the town is able to move forward with whatever it is it needs to do. And so that would be a separate conversation from the rest of this plan itself.
And I know we've been talking about East Beach, but I do just want to make it clear that the splitting of overwash material, it would be split along Atlantic Avenue and Beach Avenue in the roadway layout. So it's just important to know that that policy would be carried through consistently on that town-owned property. And we have been working with Ross because he is a stakeholder down in that area as well.
And the Elephant Rock Beach Club as well.
And the Elephant Rock Beach Club as well, yes.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it has.
Yeah, sorry, Richard. We answered like 80 more things we wanted to talk about after that question.
It's a very big plan document, so we
Yeah.
have to say.
Actually, one of the edits to the plan was to try to slim down the document. We've also been working to create some public-facing material. You have some of it in front of you now to point out to residents where to look through the plan, kind of a user guide on, because it's a very thick plan with a lot of information, but there's a lot of great info in there that the public could use. For example, we did sediment characterization along all 3 beaches. So if someone wanted to nourish their property, their private property, they could look to that sediment characterization data to find compatible material to bring in and nourish that property. So that's a really nice thing to have at their disposal. We want to make sure the plan makes it so that the public can understand where to point to certain information.
Anything else from the board? Any comments from the public? I didn't see you back there.
Hi, my name's Kevin. I'm president of the East Beach Association. I'll get right to the point. One thing that stands out to me is the report mentions private property rights. And you've got 50 or so residents on the north side of East Beach Road. And as we saw in late '23 and early '24, we had quite a bit of material on the road, which passed over onto the north side of the road, making it pretty much impossible for people to utilize their land without doing any sort of grading or whatever the situation might be, so they could utilize their private property. So my concern is that's been overlooked. We've been told that that material has to stay there. I invited members of the Woods Hole group down to observe what we do down there in our community, and my emails were unanswered. So I feel as though this report has not taken into consideration all the concerns of the private property owners. I would respectfully say I appreciate the reach out to be told about what happened in your conversations amongst yourselves to respect the private property rights and put the material back on the south side, which will protect not only that area of the road, but the private property owners themselves. But it does nothing to address anything on the north side, and I feel as though it was left out of the discussion after our meeting back in January to be able to take it another step further to have more input in this report. And I'm not really happy. I'm glad that some concessions have been made, but I think a little bit more can be done before we actually take this thing, propose it, and push it for a notice of intent.
Thank you. Did you want to address any of that?
Yes, Kevin, I do believe I did respond to your emails, and I apologize that you feel that I did not. I will note that I have not been able to go down in the past 2 months, but I have been down to the site many times and have seen what the lots look like. The plan does not state that that material cannot be redistributed or manipulated along private property. The plan gives guidance on best practices when it is manipulated. I understand that the trailers need a flat surface in order to be placed, but this is a really dynamic system, and the material wants to continue moving. So we do recommend that instead of a leveling, that material is raised, potholes or divots are filled in to try to raise up to a higher elevation.
But the material, when it washes over to the north side, in the plan, we don't recommend that people can't manipulate that material on their lots. That's something that people would be able to do, provided they have a notice of intent, they have all their permits squared away.
Okay, so it's just that we didn't want to physically remove from the north side and move it to the south side. You're saying if it's there, it needs to stay there, but they can still move it.
Which is what, when yes, and the select board's policy right now is when it washes over to the north side of the road, the town, on the north side of the right-of-way, the town will leave it there.
Right, the town right now doesn't move anything out of the right, right? Yeah. Any other comments?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Haney with Coastal Geologist with Coastal Zone Management. So for work on private property, they do need to talk with the Conservation Commission. So any activities on the Berry Beach, removing material from the north side of the road is not recommended. That's manipulation of a primary dune under the Wetlands Act. So there are going to be some challenges with that, but that is a separate private property issue. Migration of the Berry Beach is part of coastal processes. The more we interfere with it, the more challenges we could have down the road. So we've been providing technical assistance to this project, trying to help balance those competing interests and protect the public interests. And it's a very vulnerable site. So, we're a resource. We've been helping to support the town, and we're trying to help find that balance.
Thank you. Anything else? So you're not asking for any action today, but you're going to have, can you just say again when that public comment
May
period?
20th, 6 p.m. It'll be a virtual meeting. We haven't set up the meeting link yet, but the flyer will go out sometime this week.
Okay, so check the town website for posting for that May 20th meeting for public input.
Yep.
And then potentially on June 1, then you might be coming back for us to make some finalizations of the NOI.
Yep.
All right, anything else before we let them go? All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate your
you.
time. Now we're playing moving agenda again. So we're going to move up the old high school reuse conversation. So we're going to take up action item 5I, the old high school reuse. So I'm just going to kick it off here. We did have an email from the chair of the Long-Term Building Committee, Christopher Thrasher. This email was in February, who advised that they were not able to come up with a recommendation for a town meeting. And he says, it has become clear that the current committee is rather hopelessly deadlocked. I've publicly and privately implored members of the select board to end the long-term building committee and to take up the matter moving forward. So I thought tonight we would talk about whether we wanted to, what we want to do with the long-term building committee, And then I would also like to make sure that we get an update on whatever going on right now. And then we talk about how we want to approach this topic moving forward.
Okay.
I don't know what order you want to do that. Craig, you are the member that was a liaison to the committee, right?
And I think I've had conversations here before. I think we need to take a hard look at the committee, perhaps disband it and reconstruct it around what the projects we have now. They did retain RGB Associates to come in. They did a review of all of the studies that have been done previously on this, and became good subject matter experts on the issue of the high school, former high school. It also sort of absorbed a lot of time and effort, and there were a couple of areas that weren't paid attention to. One, which is one of the issues that I pointed out earlier, the affordable housing opportunities there. It never seemed to make it on the agenda, but I wasn't on the board when that happened, and so I can't speak to what happened at that point. I became the liaison to the long-term building committee in 24. The other thing is not enough attention paid to other buildings. We sort of what to do with the annex, what to do with how to balance the needs of the council on aging to grow, and whether that involves giving up the current site or whether it involves sharing, having space in both buildings. I think we've been looking at the latter as an approach, and then the whole issue of if the town annex is structurally deficient in terms of the housing town offices, what do we do with them, and how do we also deal with this building? Do we put extension on this building? Do we move all town functions into the old high school? Those are still issues that we sort of ducked when we looked at the report that came before us about 6 months ago.
And so, Chris, I'm going to just fast forward to your 90-day report. So you actually had recommended in your infrastructure and capital section of your 90-day report, you actually had a recommendation about these were for your goals, not necessarily the whole board. But you want to talk about what you were? I'm specifically looking at 1.2 about the long-term facility strategies. Can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts about that?
Certainly. So there's a lot of town-owned buildings here, and facilities maintenance is something that is a long-term expense to the town. As a large expenditure that the town is responsible for, we should have a plan for it. The longer we go with deferred maintenance, it's going to cost the town down the road. I know that there have been a lot of conversations with regards to the use of our facilities. Do our existing facilities meet the needs of our departments? And my hope was to have conversations both about the former high school property and where the conversations have been since my start here, as well as try to identify and summarize the concerns that have been expressed about some of our other properties. So including perhaps long-term needs and investments here in Town Hall, looking at the condition of the annex, and putting forward a recommendation to the board as to a direction that we may want to consider.
Great, thank you. And can you also just talk a little bit give us an update on where we are with the study, I don't know, was this study code compliance review? Can you just tell us where we are with that? Because that was the Council on Aging had asked for a compliance review.
Yes. So that is something that I've been in coordination with Ralph and Bev on. So we contracted with Building, Fire, and Access here several weeks ago to do an updated code analysis of the area that they're looking to take over. Within your packet, you do have a draft of that report. Based off the initial information, it does look promising where only a limited investment may be needed in order to have some activity there. There's some additional conversations that Bev and Ralph plan to have, with these consultants so that we can confirm that plan of action. But our hope is sometime soon we can come to the board with exactly what are those specific things, so that we can, again, continue the conversation about having the COA potentially use that site.
I also want to call your attention to, because we submitted a memo to the board from the Affordable Housing Trust on the 22nd of April. Regrettably, it did not, it made it onto tonight's agenda, but it made it into our packet late this morning. So, that's been,
But that, can you just summarize what that request is?
basically, it is to, if the site is determined let's just talk about the high school. If the site is deemed surplus, the trust encourages the select board to consider developing housing on the high school property, given its side accessibility, existing conditions, assessment, and municipal control. The site is well-positioned to support a range of housing goals, including providing zoning relief for the creation of a variety of housing types, create rental and/or homeownership opportunities for low and moderate income households, as well as seniors, and clarify the 2026 housing production plan through the creation of 35 housable units, one-year certification. And then some also looking at other community uses where permitted by housing funding and other allowable services, so that you can have a sort of a multi-service component to that, which I think is what the senior center is pushing. Disposition of the property is a key way that relieves the town of ongoing maintenance costs, improvements, environmental remediation, or other pre-development needs. And I think that, the trust recognizes there are certain physical and infrastructure challenges, including costs associated with adaptive reuse, demolition of existing structures, either partially or in their entirety, and on-site wastewater systems. Additional studies may be needed to fully evaluate these conditions within the context of a housing development scenario. Experienced housing developers can assess these challenges and identify appropriate solutions and funding strategies. And the trust is able to provide financial resources to help address these constraints, contingent upon the town taking steps to facilitate the disposition of property for housing purposes.
Right, thank you. So if I look at the way that I've been thinking about this is we have kind of short, medium, and longer term problems going on here. So in the very short run, we have this results of the code compliance for this would be for the more rapid use of the facility for the Council on Aging because there's not a long-term plan yet, right? So I think that is still continuing. So you said you're working with the building inspector and with Beverly Bish to kind of advance whatever that proposal is. And so then you'll come back to us soon with whatever recommendations there are, if there's a cost associated with anything we need to do. So that'll come back pretty quickly, right, within the next few months, right?
Yes.
So then I think the problem becomes, how do we as a board want to continue the evaluation of the options here? Because I believe that we should disband the long-term building committee. I believe that I agree with them. They appear to be deadlocked and unable to make progress. So, then what do? So we can task the town administrator with coming up with a proposal. My thought was that we have two of us work with the town administrator to kind of put a proposal, not a proposal for the end state, but the first thing is a proposal for how are we going to attack this problem, right? So I think some of the questions that we still have are, if we talked about moving municipal offices over there, but we didn't get corresponding, what repairs need to happen to this to the other buildings, so that you could kind of put it a cost associated with it, right? We never really did get a comprehensive, it would cost this much to move everything to the new facility, but if we didn't move it, these are the repairs that we need to do for the buildings or the needs of the departments. I don't think we ever got a clear vision of that. So But I also know the public doesn't really want another study. You know, we've got a lot of studies out there. So again, my thought was maybe we task 2 members to work with with the town administrator to kind of come up with a plan of attack here. But I'm open to other suggestions.
Could I add to what Shauna said? I think that's a great idea, as opposed to kicking it to committee where it's going to languish again. I think a lot of these answers have been found. There's just no clear vision, and these answers are scattered across the town. Going back to, like, this is a complex problem set. Going back to my training in the military, there's like any complex problem set, you always look for desired end state. I almost think that we should come up with a desired end state from each board member and then work courses of action backwards to say, this is what it would take to get to that desired end state. And then meet back up and figure out, okay, here's 2 desired end states we'd like to proceed with, and maybe bring those to the voters.
I like that.
I think if we try and flesh stuff out without an end state, we're gonna end up in the same situation where we're circling around, versus just each of us come up with one end state, and then we present, here's what these 5 end states would cost and what the timelines would be.
Madam Chair, I like that approach, but I think we should add that we should put an end date on this.
100%.
April 13th, 2027. That's the election day in 27. I'm pretty sure it's the 13th.
Yeah.
And then work backwards from that, and any necessary special town meetings could occur before then. But if you have an end date, and this is it, there's no other committee, it's us. We got to make a recommendation, put it before the town. If one of the components is debt exclusion, fine. That would be decided on April 13th, and that's it. It will or it won't. And if these measures, whatever they may be, don't pass, then it's over. You get rid of the property. That's what we have to do. You can't just go on, we can't go on forever with this, going back and forth. We've got to show a seriousness about this in hope that we can convince the voters of a logical approach that will meet their approval. And if it's something that's not going to meet their approval, well, then it's over before it even begins. But I think it's critical to put an end date on this, because that tells people we're serious. We're going to get this done one way or the other. Some people aren't going to like it, but we're going to make our best efforts to do that.
Madam Chair. Obviously, this is a contentious issue, again, in this community, and it's been going on for way too long. I've said this for the past year, and then when I was running for office last year. None of these ideas are mutually exclusive, so I agree with Rick's point, is that we need to figure out how to get to that point. But at the same time, any discussion about kind of the disposition of the building, I think, is probably a mistake. Because I think that there should be a couple of members here, at least working with the school committee and the superintendent, as to what that building is currently used for from a school standpoint. Let's calculate the amount that it would take to build fields elsewhere on the new campgrounds that they have access to, the facilities that use that building for storage, the admin offices which have to be located in a different location in town, the rec sports that use the gym, and the after-school care that is currently in there. So we dispose of the building, but we're going to spend $12 to $15 million to find places for kind of these other 5, things that currently the school committee is using that building for. I think there's a short term, as pointed out, a medium term, and a long term. And I think the short term is figuring out how to get the Council of Aging in there. For the past year and a half, we've been trying to get the Council of Aging in there, and I think we have that study, and hopefully have a way to get them in there for the short term. And then we look at that medium term. I think the housing component is a great idea, but we need to figure out exactly how that's going to impact the rest of the building. Can you have housing there if you move municipal offices in there, or if you have, obviously, the after-school care or Council of Aging? Does that cause an issue? But I think I don't have an issue with that. I think that's also a way, but that's not a short-term thing, right? That's a long-term. I think that'll probably be beyond, my 3 years sitting on this board. I want something immediate. I think people want to see something done. Everyone I talk to in the community, what's going to happen with high school? What's going to happen with high school? Something needs to happen. They need to see some progress. And I think getting at least the Council of Aging in there based on that study, I'd be happy to volunteer on that committee to work with Chris, to work with the superintendent, Dr. Roy, to figure out exactly what's being used in there, and then figure out with the Council of Aging how to get in there. I mean, I would like the deadline to be, I would like Council of Aging in there before April 13th. If it's a short term, short money to get them in there and to use that facility, and then there's an intermediate plan, I think we could also go down that road too.
So to add to what Jake said, is like he already just presented a desired end state. It's not my desired end state, but a desired end state there is if you divest that property, figure out the total costs to move all the stakeholders and users of that building elsewhere, and then the cost to either sell it or tear it down and whatever. So there's an end state. So I think, like I said, find end states and we'll work backwards.
And I think that the whole thing comes down to messaging. I think the public has not been, and this is not a function of anyone at this table or anyone here, is the messaging. I think if you craft a strong enough message saying if we get rid of the building, what it's going to cost, what it's going to cost to move the school facilities elsewhere, and if not, and we agree on a, say, a $12 million budget to outfit it for whatever we put in there, that makes more sense. It all comes down to nobody has any clue what's going on. This thing's been studied to death for 5 years, and nobody really has any understanding as to what direction we're going in. So I agree with Dick that there has to be an end date, but I actually even believe that that end date should be sooner. I would like to start, not another committee, but work with Chris, work with the school committee, and have an answer to you before the June 1st meeting. And then almost every meeting have another action item as to where we're going and how we're getting in there. I'm afraid that another 2 or 3 months goes by on this COA study. Okay, now we're back to the fall, and then we get bumped in the winter. And I would rather have more concrete attainables as opposed to a year down the road.
The problem I have with that is that we're going to bump other things off the agenda. We've sort of committed ourselves to the Council on Aging with a couple of, caveats to it. And I agree with you. If we have started that process and we've looked at the building codes and everything else, and we can proceed, I agree we should do that. But I also think that we have never, when you look at housing development, getting back to my particular concern among others, those projects generally use outside developers. We're not talking, so what do outside developers use? They bring resources that, and the ability to access tax credits and other financing that we don't have as a town. So when you talk about housing development, you're not talking strictly about how we're going to go it alone and construct affordable housing for the town of Westport and pass an override for that. But how do we basically engage the services of a private housing development entity? Nokochoke Village is a classic example. We had town land that had been acquired through tax title and some other vehicles, had been sitting around for a while. The disposition of that was to RFP the site for housing development. There was a decision also that a portion of the property should have gone to the Land Conservation Trust to preserve the property. So the deal that was brokered was we did an RFP for the development of housing. We did an agreement with the land trust for the conservation land that abuts it, and what was part of the parcel. And two, we subsequently hired the same development entity to be the management entity, because one of the concerns about bringing in developers is they come in and they do the development, but then they walk away. And we did choose a development entity that had the ability to manage the property and had a commitment to see the project through both stages, not only the development of it and the construction, but the management of the tenants. And something that there was a lot of concerns and a lot of angst about when we first talked about that it's nothing. There's no complaints. There's no one who says, oh, that awful neighborhood over there, Nokochoke Village. It's generally viewed by residents of the town as an asset, as a community asset. And it's an attractive place. I mean, so enough of my, I'll get off my soapbox.
Craig, could I offer just a thought? As opposed to sending it out to have another study done in regards to low-income housing there, would you be amicable to trying to find similar projects that took place in the Commonwealth and then use those as an example for what
Well,
it
we,
would
we
cost?
did that before, and when you look at these entities, they should have people who have some expertise in other areas, and also that their demographics or their experience level is similar, so, yeah.
So would you concede then that
Oh, yeah.
information is readily available?
We're not making it up as we go along.
Okay.
What we're doing is looking at a process, because housing in that building and grounds has never been part of the evaluation of that property. And that's, and that decision was made before all but the three of us that got on the board most recently were not part of that. And I think I'm just asking that we revisit that now that we have, that the building is back ostensibly under the control of the select board.
I know that.
Always has been, but right now, we were deferring to the long-term building committee.
Yeah, I just think that if we find a project where it's been done already, we can say, hey, these costs are going to be similar to the town, these costs are going to be similar. And we can use that as a basis without having to actually go into a study for it.
Yeah.
So the concern that I have, so we did task at one point, the long-term building committee with evaluating, turning it into municipal offices, to move most of the annex, the council on aging, some of the services here, to move them into the schools. So there was a brief, I don't know if you were on the committee at the time.
That was part of the charge, is to.
The charge
Yeah, it
was
was.
move the
RGB.
municipal offices, and I know that the finance committee chair and I both were saying, you need the comparison, you need if we move the council on aging out of their current building and move them over there, that saves you money on that property, or if you don't move them, what repairs are needed to that property, right? So you look at each of the building, you look at each of the, now, I think the reason that the long-term building committee abandoned that is because it was becoming prohibitively expensive. So it was one of those, like, it was now $70 million or something like that. And then it changed the purposing. So I like the idea of us, like, here's the path that we want to pursue, and let's vote on the path we want to pursue and just go on a path. I agree completely, Dick, with needing an end date. What I worry about and I think, what I worry about is, in order to get on an April 13 ballot, you have to have had your final decision about where you're going to go a month before, in March, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then that means you have to have had enough information about a design or the potential total cost, a couple months ahead of that. So I'm fine with it. I think we have a lot of information, we can gather it together, but I just want to, a year sounds like a long time, it's not that long, actually, when you start backing up. But I think we owe, what I had thought we were going to get out of the long-term building committee in April, or in February, was a proposal that said we need, $500,000 to do detailed design so that we could go out to bid, right? And so we didn't get that. We didn't even get a proposal because I know we've talked about studies, but you can't ask the voters for a debt exclusion without some kind of bid.
Well, there were plans and scenarios and graphics of this campus approach, which
Yeah.
was to take, to look at the building as upwards of 3 separate modules and what to do with it. But I think that there was the cost of that, I think someone muttering, one scenario had it as high as 70 million, and then the do-nothing scenario, which was to fix things up, it was going to cost 20 million. Well, any one of those outcomes was going to require a debt exclusion override. And I think that members of the committee, there was not a lot of collective unanimity there, but all knew that a $20 million business study, or a $20 million project, was not going to move the ball down the road. That you needed something a little bit bolder, something a little bit more sweeping. Whether the boldness is demolition and selling the vacant land, or whether the boldness is in making creative use of the property and trying to get a multi-year plan to get to that stage.
So Chris, so we talked about if we were to move forward with tasking you working with two of the select board members, what resources would you need in order to take that on?
So, I think what my approach would be is to collect all the study information to date. I would have a conversation, with our architects and engineering team who have been working on this project with the long-term building committee and see what data we could pull from their various assessments. It was good data, so it didn't go to waste. I want to emphasize that. The other thing that I think, just based off the discussion tonight, is I think it would be valuable just from each of the individual members to reach out to me and share your thoughts, right? Because as was mentioned tonight, I think that there are short, medium, long-term considerations, and I think it would be valuable to the discussion that the board as a whole is voting on what that direction is in the short, medium, and long term. Even if there may be some disagreements or additional information we have to talk about. The other thing that I think would be helpful to the board is looking at the various considerations depending on what path the board chooses. So, as an example, regardless of what ultimately goes into a certain portion of the building, we still need to have a plan in place for the existing operations that are occurring there. So I think regardless of the path we choose, there are certain answers that we're going to need to get. And so what I would do, or my hope is working with the members, is sit down and come up with that list, those lists of things that we should take into consideration, create a timeline for, similar to what I did with my goals checklist, kind of come up with what's that action plan. And then, based off that, maybe have the board set the timeline for each of those items.
So based on what you heard today, do you think it would be helpful, should we task you with going to gather this? Do you want us to get some representatives for you to work with? Like, what do you think is a good next step for that could come back in the next meeting? I would like to see whatever we have about the moving the council on aging, because I think that's further along and we're ready to do that. But
Sure, yeah.
would we want to, at our next meeting, appoint a couple of people to work with you? Do you want us to do you think it would be helpful if a couple of us are appointed now? Like, what do you, I know I just threw this at you.
Yeah, no, certainly welcome to sit down with a couple board members to kind of bounce it off of, if you will, and just make sure that we're capturing everything that the board is looking for. I think whether that's now or at the next meeting, I'm happy to put something together for the board. Also, I think of note when you're talking about resources is I know that all the funds weren't fully expended from the previous authorization. And so coming out of the next meeting, if there are certain things that do have a cost to them, we might be able to use this as that funding source for those items.
I think that when we talked about this at the Affordable Housing Trust, the recommendation was to work with RGB and to see if we could find funds to modify their engagement in terms of supplementing it to include housing as one of those considerations.
Yeah, and I'll just make a note of that because I've not put eyes on the original proposal that was put forward, but whether it's RGB or even another firm that comes in and kind of takes all that data, because it's a different scope entirely, it might be worth just a clean proposal from them on what the new task is, that we're asking of them. So it might be as an amendment or, based off of the discussion at the next board meeting, we might say, yep, this is the scope of work we want to move forward with for those items.
I think an amendment, well, my suggestion would be an amendment to the contract. The other thing is anything that would include consideration of housing opportunities, we have money in our budget for pre-development costs of projects. As maybe most of you know, if not all of you, the Housing Trust has sort of a unique status within town government. We are a committee appointed by the select board under the town, but we also have some abilities in terms of grants and facilities to develop housing, and have been pulling together resources over probably the last 5 years to get serious about another project of substance.
So how about, I'm just throwing this out here. So what if we take what, kind of what Rick was saying, what if between now and our next meeting, or, give Chris some time to compile the information, we each communicate with Chris about our proposed end state, like where do we want to see the project going, right? So if we each independently meet with or send information to Chris about what we would like to see the long-term goal is, then he could compile that information and bring it back to us, and we could understand whether we have 5 different ideas, do we have one, we coalescing around one idea, that kind of thing. And then we'd have more of a, we could vote on, okay, we want to take this path and get more information around that one specific path. So that way you're not researching every scenario, but does that make sense? Like in the next 3 weeks to each of us communicate with Chris, and then at the June 1 meeting, he kind of comes back with some of the summary, and then we kind of vote on a direction. Is that?
I'd like to work with Chris on that, if able.
So let's, so my thought was not to form like a committee, but to each of us talk to Chris, and then on the next meeting, we could talk about if we want to form a committee. But yeah, I would say talk to Chris as much as you want. Or as much as he'll let you. Was that okay with you all? Does that make sense to you, Chris?
Yep.
All right. I know there's public comments, so is there anything on the board before we get the public comment?
Just one more point, and Madam Chair, I've had discussions with many in the community on an affordable housing component at the high school, and I believe that it is something that's doable. I think it's on a smaller scale, and when I speak specifically about affordable housing, I believe it should be senior affordable housing. I think that the school system cannot support increased affordable housing at that, of families in that location. I've been told that by people that they cannot, that the school would not be able to support that. So when I speak of affordable housing, I talk about affordable housing of seniors in Westport that are in 3,000 square foot homes that want to age in place here in Westport and stay in Westport. I think that's the best component that would be there at the high school, is an affordable component that would be geared towards seniors or veterans. And I've had discussions with many in the community that are working towards that and want to work towards that, and I think that's a possibility.
Anything from the public?
David Lulima, I'm on the advisory board for the Council on Aging. I have a suggestion. I think over the last year or so, we were intellectualizing how we were going to do, what we were going to do, and the process in which it was going to happen. From the perspective of the larger perspective of the entire building, and for the immediate perspective of what to do with the Council on Aging, who needs space regardless. We got nothing for a long time, and my suggestion to Chris is this, because we just got a report back on I'll call it Regulation 10 versus Regulation 9, which we were operating under Regulation 9, now we're operating under Regulation 10, which is the building code for what you can do and what you can't do. However, for a year and a half, we never heard, never saw, never read anything about Regulation 10. But we had a huge, long, 90-page, engineering-oriented, what's wrong with the building, okay? In engineering language, not in English, not in what you can do X, but you can't do Y. What did we get back? When we asked if we could go in that building for a particular space, we did a review vis-a-vis a Regulation 10, I'll call it Regulation 10, and we got a report back. And interestingly enough, we had ended up with 2 concepts. We ended up with occupancy, and we ended up with use. And in the report, it said, oh, by the way, you can go there and have classes there, okay, under Regulation 10, but if there's over 39 people, you're going to have to put sprinklers in. And so the revelation came to me that we had all this conversation for a long time. I had conversations pre when you had I even had housing way before, way before. 5 years ago, I proposed we do the same thing in Nookachuk we do at the high school. Nobody wanted to hear about anything like that. I proposed it in housing 2 years ago in the article that I wrote in the proposal for the campus. Nobody wanted to hear about that. My suggestion is this. I would take the 90-page report, and I would take the Regulation 10, because it's happening to us right now as we speak. What do we have to do with the use and the occupancy to get in that building for us? And I would say take your 90-page report, somebody translate it into English, okay? And you have your conversations about uses, municipal use, educational use, culinary use, all the uses. Bang them up against Regulation 10. And so you know if I'm going to have classes in there, if I have more than 39 people, which we found out now, if you have more than 39 people, I have to put a sprinkler system in. Well, how come I didn't know that before? How come I didn't know that a year ago? How come you didn't know that when you were trying to figure out intellectually A, B, C, D, E, or F? We need, this is the lawyer in me saying, let's talk English here. Don't talk engineering, don't talk architectural. At some point, you have to convert it to what are the uses you want to use, and what is it going to cost in an occupancy and a use perspective. Can I do that? Is it relevant? Is it affordable? I don't know if housing is affordable or not in that building. I have no idea. No one's translated anything in this process. And I find, personally, it's a little annoying after a year, 2 years, someone finally says to us, oh yeah, you can go in there, but by the way, if you get over 39, you're going to have to put sprinklers in. Didn't anybody know that before? That's my point. And I think if you're going to do considerations for use of that building and occupancy, I would just come up with ideas about, well, how about if we do culinary classes? Let's take Regulation 10, bang it up against that. It's going to cost you $20 million to do that. Have numbers related to ideas here. Otherwise, this conversation is circular, which is what we've been doing. Personally, I've been involved with it. My wife wonders why I spend all this time, why I have this gray hair. Why? Because we're just going around in a circle. We need, I agree with, we need clarity. And we didn't get it until Regulation 10. We knew about Regulation 10 a long time ago. We didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about it until we pushed you to let us go in the building. And finally you said, oh, by the way, Regulation 10, what? Well, what does it say? What it said was, well, yeah, if you want to do specifically what do you want to do, and here are the caveats to it. Well, I think any decisions you're going to make, you should know that. If it's housing, if it's culinary, if it's whatever use you want to use. I mean, I don't know right now if the school department wanted to use that building, how would it measure up against Regulation 10? Are they grandfathered? I don't know. I mean, we don't have answers to these questions. So it's going to be very hard for Chris and you guys to move forward. I mean, gratefully, hopefully, we can get in the building. Because if you don't let us in that building, we don't have anywhere to go. We don't have anywhere to go. And I agree with Jake that you should be, if you're going to take that building and use it for something else, you're going to have to figure out what to do with after-school program. You're going to have to figure out what to do with administrative offices. You're going to have to figure out what to do with Council on Aging, brimming with services that we need. We don't have any space. You have a complex issue, and I agree that the Long-Term Building Committee was given sort of the wrong message, because maybe housing should have been part of the consideration. Why wasn't it?
Well, I wasn't on the board at the time, unfortunately.
Well, I understand that, but just, it's a rhetorical question. Just-
We tasked the long-term building committee. We absolutely tasked the long-term building committee with putting together a plan for putting the municipal services, as many as could fit, into that building.
I understand.
They did not come back with a recommendation.
I hear
We
you.
asked them to talk about the comparative costs of repairs from the other locations. We asked them to look at the impact on the other places. They did not do it. So we put our faith in a committee incorrectly. We put our faith in a committee that did not deliver. So we need to make sure that we have a clear objective for what we do next.
And I agree with that, and I'm just suggesting what I learned, what we learned, what the council learned from this experiment of getting into the building and having this Regulation 10, which was in existence. I can't tell you the start date of it, but it was, I don't know, a year and a half ago. None of us knew about it. It might have been easier to make decisions if we knew. I mean, we had this 90-page report of everything wrong with the building, but we didn't have anything over here that said, oh, by the way, if you want to get in there now, you could get these people in here, but if you want to do educational things, don't have over 39 people, you got to get a sprinkler system. If you want to have a kitchen, I mean, it'd be easier to understand what I could do next if I knew what the parameters were when I started. That's it. Sorry I took so long.
So may I ask you a question, Dave?
Did you want to say something?
Yeah. Do you guys have a timeline for moving in there if it's under 39 people or above 39 people? I'm saying, did you guys get to that point in it?
Hi, I'm Eileen Moncrief. I'm the Chair of Council on Aging. If we were told tomorrow that we could move in by the end of the month, we have soft plans, but we do have money committed to help us do this by the Friends. There is also a grant for, I believe it's $200,000 that we should be hearing from the state. I believe by the end of the month. So Council on Aging could have a commitment of close to $300,000. And of that, we know that we would have to have a door system that would open for handicap accessibility. Basically, we're talking about...
You're not talking directly enough
You're
into the
not hearing me?
mic. We can hear you, but other people can't.
All right. You can't hear me? Okay. I can be heard. We have talked around and around about this. Tonight is perhaps the most creative discussion I think I have heard in 2 years on how and what should happen. I also remind the select board members that we're probably the only committee, commission, organization that has actually done a strategic plan. We asked people, what do you want? Anybody who was over the age of 60 at the time, who was a registered voter in town, was asked. And we got some pretty good feedback. And if you don't have a 22-page copy of our strategic plan, I can get that to you very easily. But basically, we were charged with creating new programs, keeping the programs that we have and allowing people in. We were charged with keeping up with what are the current issues for aging. People want to age in place. They want to stay here in Westport. It's as simple as that. And we have the documentation. We heard people. And this is why we have been perhaps a little more proactive in the last 2 years than our previous Council on Aging boards have been. We are charged with listening to the people in town, what they want, and translating that to the director. And we listen to the director and find out what we can afford, what we cannot afford in our resources. I think that I would remind you that a good deal or most of the staff is volunteer staff. If you come to the Council on Aging tomorrow, we have 2 receptionists there. Both of them are volunteers. So if it's a matter of staffing, we've already talked about the idea that we have volunteers. We have other people that would be very willing to volunteer to be a receptionist if we were able to use another space for the exercises, for example. I'm a volunteer instructor. We set up the room. We cleaned out a room ourselves, tidied it, set up the furniture, set up the computers, set up the TV with our own resources. We have a TV hanging on the wall, and we got volunteers to help us. So long and short of it is that just let me know tomorrow, and we could make things happen.
So I think the short version of the answer is they can be in there pretty quickly. I think from my perspective, and I've said this before at more than one meeting, I want a lawyer, a code compliance officer, and an insurance agent to tell me that it's okay to move those services into that building.
That's right.
That's fair.
We're not talking about.
We've got the code compliance report that we're coming in. I want to make sure we're properly insured for whatever use we have, and I just want legal to bless it, and I'm fine.
I believe we do have the documentation from the insurance, because we're basically doing the same issues, the same classes, programs, activities that we would be doing, and it is a town, we're doing it on another town property. I do believe that that document exists. I don't have it tonight, but I could probably get it for you in the next.
Certainly before you move in.
Yeah, before we move in, way before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, sir.
Cliff Reed, this boggles my mind. I went to the first meeting and I heard a set of rules set out, what they were charged to do. Okay, they wait more than a year, go to the second meeting, and none of those rules were followed. What they brought forward was totally different from what they said they were going to look at, which is why you're sitting here in this position today. You don't have any code requirements to bring this building up to code. Should have been the first thing this study did. What does it take to bring this up to mass code?
We had that.
I've seen them. They're so wrong, it's ridiculous.
We had a report from code compliance.
They're bad. But you're heading in a direction that's going to take you in a circle. Until you get what it's going to take to make this building usable for all activities. And as soon as you start moving different things in, you might have a problem with the activities you already have in the building.
I believe we do. In
Okay.
fact, have a problem with the activities we already have in the building.
So you're putting yourself, you say lawyer and insurance, you should be getting that information today, not when they move in, which I hope they move in tomorrow, or as soon as possible. But I think your whole purpose of what you're doing is the cart before the horse. What I want to put in the building isn't what you need. What can I put in the building after I do A, B, C, and D? And Chris, good luck.
Thank you.
Nathan Allen, 192 Drift Road. I have sort of a higher level question, which is all the talk about the high school. Is there a strategy that spans all the town buildings where you guys decide what is the overall plan for how municipal workers are accounted for, how Council on Aging is accounted for, and then how that is divided up amongst the buildings? Because it seems like we already have a space problem anyway. And if the high school is demolished or sold for private sale, all of that space is lost, right? And so there should be some higher level plan, I think,
The plan,
similar to what Rick or Mr. Mundy was saying.
the plan did evaluation of the other sites and the other buildings in town. So,
Okay, so this is incorporated into that?
well, yes.
There was a very high level, estimation of
Right.
some of the repairs that we needed to the other buildings, yeah.
Not even from the cost perspective, but more what, like the long term, that we're talking short, medium, long. What is the long-term perspective, the strategy for how not only the high school is used, but also this building, the annex, the council on
That was
aging?
part of the, that was part of,
That was part of the charge to the long-term building committee
Okay.
that did not result
So it didn't
in a
happen.
recommended action.
Okay.
I can say that in 2018, I was on the high school reuse committee. I chaired that committee at the time. And because that was when we were looking at approval for the new middle high school. And we had a plan at the time, now this is 8 years ago, we had a plan for where to move the administrative offices and where to house the after-school and before-school programs. And so we had a plan for that in 2018. People didn't like it, and, and I was in the minority, and so it didn't go anywhere. But, no, we had a plan back then, but I think needs have changed. Right, so I think we absolutely need to look at the entirety of the municipal offices and the buildings and what costs, like the highway department building over here is terrible.
but
right?
it should also be noted that from the time that we started on the construction of the new middle high school to the time we ended, there was some vast
There were.
changes made to that design and its
Yeah.
activities that could be conducted.
Yeah, that's true. Because 8 years ago is a long time, yeah.
Gay Gillespie, and I'm not sure quite where to begin. I've followed this for
Us
so
too.
many years and written letters to the editors and making recommendations, but I currently sit on the Friends Board and work closely with Bev up there, and I'm also on the Affordable Housing Trust. And from the Friends perspective, I love this idea of being able to move up there because I myself have been on a waiting list for about a year and a half to get into one of the classes because there just isn't any room. And the building, all these buildings are older than the current high school building, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. We keep pouring a lot of money into all the new AC, what are they called, splits and things like that.
$1 million
Here, into a
into-
building, and the high school, is sitting up there as a newer building and with a lot more space. But I think my main point right now is that as a member of the Affordable Housing Trust, one of the disappointments in the long-term building plan committee was that they did not include housing. And that part of the building up there, the facility, was to be demolished. And it just to me seems not mindful of what could be happening there if we could go back and look at that. And I'm not sure if you could remind me, how much money do we approve at town meeting for the architect for that project? Do you remember?
200,000.
I think it was 200. I think
220,000.
Might have been 250,000.
Wouldn't it be sensible for us to go back to them who have all that information about the building and ask them to just, could you look at this and amend our contract and include a housing component? Give them also all this information that we're getting from the COA. What was it, Chapter 10? Yeah. Is that whatever it is? Put all that in there for them so that they've got a clear mission and they could talk to the people who are here tonight talking about this to get something happening. Because we can't afford not to do anything. And I just have to put another thought out there. If we keep the facility and we keep the playing fields, we could possibly put some affordable housing over at the campground property, which would be an ideal site with walkable to school, library, community. Just thinking outside the box, just putting it out there as an opportunity down the road, if we are able to hold on to the high school facility, the old high school.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so are we clear on what we want next? So next step, we're all going to communicate with you.
Yes.
You're going to collate the information.
Yep.
Come up with do we have some sort of consensus or do we need to vote on a direction to go? And then we'll figure out from our committee how we want to move forward with that. So if you have recommendations for how we form the group that's going to work on this, talk with Chris. Is there any
Yeah, I think if he can poll the board, we can talk about it. Maybe he can use his, ability to talk with all of us without us
That
having
us talking with each other.
with each other and running, sketchily close to the open meeting law. So I think that would be the best way to do it. And I think that, and I would suggest if you haven't had a chance to, after this discussion, to take another look at that report and given all the perspectives that have been shared about what the expectations for it were, to see how much you, in your professional opinion, how much the report conformed to the expectations in charge and how much it may have fallen short of that. 'Cause we all have our opinions about it, but it would be good with a fresh set of eyes, Chris, to have you do that as well.
Sure.
Okay, anything else on that topic? Any questions?
I hate to name drop, but I talked to Don Davidson last Friday about the old high school, and a good point that he had was if we get to a point where we say divestment's off the table, we want to do something else, I think we need to stop calling it the old high school. We just need, it needs to be called something else to just get the mindset away from there that this is a valuable town building that we wish to keep and we wish to use productive use from.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Could be a community center.
Or a municipal building.
Yeah.
Okay,
Building.
so let's move on. I know we played multiple agenda here. So let's talk about the committee appointments. So review the activity of select board appointed committees and vote to dissolve or consider amending the committee changes. So there was in your packet a spreadsheet. There's 38 committees on here. The town administrator has made some potential recommendations for us to possibly dissolve or maintain or maybe update the charge. So we can do that tonight, or we can just talk about it tonight and then list any specific ones for another meeting, depending on how you want to go. But I know when I looked at it earlier today, he had a potential to dissolve the audit committee. And, but wasn't in there correctly. He said it was a policy and it was actually a bylaw. So that was changed, I know, earlier today. But, so the ones, if I'm reading this correctly, so the ones that are not colored coded, you're recommending that we keep the committee, but on some of them, you've got maybe update the charge. Is that how I'm reading this?
Yes, that's correct. So the ones that have the U, in the right-hand column, so a lot of those committees were created by policy through the select board. And my recommendation for all the committees, even if they're doing exactly, what the board entails or has set out for them, is just have a document that outlines that. Yeah.
So we were talking about before this meeting, Chris and I were talking about this idea about coming up with a policy in general for how our committees should work. So things like how often do we want the committees to report to us? How many absences should we remove people from committees if they have excessive absences? Apparently, we already had a policy to remove
We already have a
people.
policy, it's 3.
It's 3. But what Chris and I were talking about is putting together the policies, our policies for direction to our committees before people start getting renewal on their committees, so that they are picking up this new policy. So we'll have a draft of that for next meeting, right?
Yes.
So then, for the purposes of this conversation today, I think the ones that are all white, where we're saying, keep the committee, we think there's a reason we got to keep the committee, but maybe we have to update their charge. Maybe that can be just part of the, hey, committee, one of the things we want you to do in the next few months is to come back with what you think your charge is and what should the charge be, and that kind of thing. But what I wanted to talk about tonight was if there's any that we should dissolve before we start getting like appointment commitment, before we start getting reappointments and things like that happening. So from the ones that we're considering dissolving, I think some of them just haven't met in a long time. So the ADA Transition Plan Committee, anybody on that committee?
I used to be. I am on
Have
it.
you ever met? Do you know what they do?
There's a story here, Madam Chair, and I would say this. No, it hasn't met. I've been on it for 9 years, and I have yet to be invited to a meeting.
You're on it too, Sean.
No, I don't
Am
take
I
it.
on it?
It's on the, in the next spreadsheet, you're on it.
Well, I don't think it's met since I was on it.
Yeah.
It was, we were looking at the Citizens with Disabilities Act, and we had a consultant go through and look at the handicapped accessibility of all the buildings in town, and we had a committee appointed to oversee that. I was actually surprised to see that we still had an ADA transition committee.
Yeah, so I think really, my opinion on that is if something came up related to ADA, we could refer that to Commission on Disability.
Disability,
We
yes.
already have
Well,
that, that's an act.
Madam Chair, here's the thing.
And you're
I'm
both.
conversant with this,
Okay,
okay?
go ahead.
Just listen. We don't need the ADA Transition Committee anymore for a couple of reasons. One is its work has been subsumed by SERPED, which is the setting up of the transition plan of 2010 and its subsequent 5-year renewals. What's remaining for us to do, us being the town, can easily be taken over by the Commission on Disability.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to propose here is at the next meeting, I'll bring this up, since I'm a member of that committee, and then I think that committee will probably agree to do that. I've already had some conversations with a minority of people on that committee, but it has no purpose anymore. What it does is still important, but it doesn't have to be done by this committee. Between SERPED and the Committee on Disability, that's where that work can be done.
So so I was of two minds of this, so I'm really interested in what you guys think. So my first thought was, if we think we should dissolve the committee, I think we should do that at a future meeting where we have a specific agenda item that says,
Yes.
consider dissolution, whatever the word is, consider dissolving this committee, so that way we have a specifically on the agenda. But we could also just vote to dissolve them today, right? So,
The only thing I would say on that is if we don't even know when the last time they met was, maybe it's just easier to dissolve them tonight. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, there are some that, right, Chris or Carla couldn't even come up with when they last met. So it's not like anyone's probably going to be offended if they don't exist anymore.
yeah, I'm fine either way. I'm fine with making a decision today, but I was thinking it might be more appropriate to specifically list it. Because on our agenda item,
Yeah.
it just says consider vote to dissolve. Well, it says vote to dissolve, so we certainly could dissolve tonight.
I mean, I think what we do is that the liaison look at the committees that they're on and see if they haven't met since you were appointed, is to say, we could actually vote to dissolve it, because no one, if you weren't
I
invited.
didn't even know I was on there.
If what?
I'm just going on the spreadsheet. I didn't want to get you in trouble, but.
My only question is like the school regulation board, it says it's a bylaw that was established, so like can we dissolve a committee that's?
No, we can't.
So that must.
We can't dissolve it directly in this meeting, so maybe we should tackle them one at a time. So for the ADA Transition Plan Committee, do we want to dissolve it, or do we want to put it on an agenda for a future item to?
I make a motion to dissolve the ADA
Second.
Transition Plan Committee.
Okay,
And any residual functions will be transferred to the Commission on Disabilities.
okay. So we have a motion and a second. And do we want to talk about that anymore?
I do.
Go ahead.
I think that's ill-advised for the reasons I just stated. That, first of all, we have a Commission on Disability which has all the authorities that relate to disability in the town, other than to the town administrator. And they will probably take it over willingly. And it's an insult to their leadership and to the whole committee to do this without consulting with them first.
I agree.
So I will vote against this, and I think it's a bad idea. And there's no hurry on this. There's zero hurry on this. This has been going on for years. And we're going to have a meeting on Monday, but it's not on the agenda, so we've got to go to the next meeting in June, and they will make a decision, and we'll make a recommendation to the select board, which I will bet my money on will be to dissolve it and subsume those functions into the Committee on Disability. But to do it without discussing it with them, I think, is a travesty.
My only question to that, Dick, then, if it's a committee that has no functions, never meets, and the members don't even know they're on the committee, is it an insult to the other committee that would absorb it if it's not even a real committee?
No, because, if I may, Madam Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's not that they haven't had a function. The function has morphed over time. The function they have is the plan, the 2010 disability plan, which was updated as recently as last year. So that function exists today and always existed. And members of the Commission on Disability had worked on it with Serped without summoning the ADA Transition Committee to get together. So that it has a purpose. And we have to make sure the purpose is still fortified, because we have in 2030, we're going to have to revamp this transition plan again.
Can I withdraw my motion?
You can.
Withdraw my motion.
And I agree. And then, to Dick's point then, for everyone that we recommend, let's just make sure that they're aware of it and put it on the next agenda. Just list them all, and then it's publicly disclosed. They're not thinking that they're getting blindsided by it. So we'll go through all the, well, up to you, Madam Chair, but we go through all these, and on the next meeting, we say dissolution of these 6 committees.
Yeah.
And then if we hear any feedback, I mean, I'm not entirely sure I'd actively go look for it, but if we don't get any feedback, we'd vote and dissolve them at the next meeting.
I think that we basically read them, and if no one says anything negative,
Yep.
we just keep on moving. Then if somebody says something negative, we do at town meetings, we'll put a hold on it.
Yeah.
And then have a discussion maybe at the next meeting about the ones we had a hold on.
So in this case, though, specifically for the ADA transition plan, I think what I just heard Dick say is he needs to be on June 1, so whatever the meeting is after June 1. Our next meeting after June 1, June 15?
Probably
June
15.
something?
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
June 15.
So is June 15 meeting for that one long enough for you to meet? I want to make sure you have, I think you have a fair point about, at least telling the
Yeah.
Commission on Disability.
Yeah, I have to go and look. We have a meeting next week, and it's about a month later, so I think that works. I think that works.
Okay.
Not for June 1, but for the subsequent meeting.
To go back to Dick's point, might it make sense then, as opposed to dissolving these committees, to flow them into a current committee for all of them?
Well, some of them do and some of them don't, I think. Like mine, the Internet Advisory Committee doesn't need to go anywhere, it can just dissolve, right? So I think we do need to address them one by one. So June 22nd is the meeting. Does that give you sufficient time?
Yep.
All right, so let's put the dissolution of the ADA transition plan on the June 22nd agenda. Okay, so then the next one on, I got to get back here, the next one on the list, somebody help me out. What was the next one?
Agricultural and Open Space Preservation Trust Fund?
Yeah, so I thought that one met, but, so the Ag Open Space, there is an agricultural commission which meets regularly. So can you just remind us what the Ag Open Space Committee is?
So this is something I had a conversation with our treasurer on. So supposedly this was a separate board that administered these trust funds. My understanding from her is a couple years ago, those funds were turned back because it was a minimal dollar amount that they were administering. And that was an action taken at town meeting. So at this point, there's no, from what I can find, structure, there's no recent meeting dates for this. But it's still something that we're tracking in our database, so it would just be, something we would just, I guess, formally just close out from our side.
All right, so let's put that one on either the June 1 or the June 22nd meeting to dissolve that one. The Audit Committee, I feel very strongly that we need to keep the Audit Committee.
Yes.
But I know, Dick, you're on the Audit Committee.
Well, there's a bylaw here.
There is, yeah.
And there are 5 functions. We didn't have an audit committee at one time, and I believe it was Karen Rouse who put the bylaw together. And these functions are important, and already the audit committee had been dealing, if you recall, we had difficulties in the treasurer's office.
Yeah.
And at that time, the audit committee was meeting every week.
Yeah.
But these are important functions that if we did away with the committee, the Board of Selectmen would have to do this, which is possible, but I don't know if you want to spend that time.
Yeah, we would have to amend the bylaws to do that, and I actually feel very strongly that we should keep the Audit Committee.
And for the record, in '24, we met 4 times. In '25, we met 3 times. In '26, we've already met twice, and we anticipate we'll meet at least 2 more times. That's all that you need to do, but like I said earlier, there was a time when we were meeting every week for a period of time, and then it ended. And we probably had 12 to 15 meetings that year.
Madam Chair, just a quick question on that. Why was that highlighted in the first place? I mean, if we
I
had
think,
meetings.
I think the town administrator didn't understand that, well, so one, the function of the, the town administrator didn't understand there was a bylaw for it. And two, the financial departments in town already are doing that, right?
Okay.
They're already, so the town accountant and the treasurer collector are already kind of doing that. It's their job to be working with the auditors and bringing auditors in. But we passed that in a bylaw specifically because the treasurer was not doing that, and we wanted to make sure there was ensured oversight over the future audits. So I don't, unless anybody's objected, I don't want to put that resolution of that one.
No.
The Energy Committee, so they met in 2022. Anybody know much about the Energy Committee? I think,
I don't.
were you
I
on?
was on that for a while.
Yeah.
Well, we were looking at alternative energy and making sure, I think when we got to the green communities designation, I think the work was largely done.
Okay. All right, so let's put dissolving that one on June 1 or June 22. The Internet Advisory Board, I have chaired that committee. We haven't met in years. I don't think it's necessary anymore. That was looking at a proposal for municipal fiber, but the funding sources that we thought might be available to fund that just didn't materialize. And so I don't think there's any point in continuing with the Internet Advisory Board.
Agree.
The Long-Term Planning Town Building Evaluation Committee, I think we should dissolve, and we'll structure that in a different way. That might be a committee, but I think we just need to reform it completely. So let's vote on that at a future meeting. The Offshore Wind Committee, I know that people recently, I know I have said that we should dissolve that committee. I've changed my mind. I think there is still a role for that, but I do think that we need to recharge the committee. But the committee, the Offshore Wind Committee voted last week to continue twice a year meetings and then as needed. So, and specifically what swayed me was the emergency response if something happens. So you'll recall one of the things that initiated the offshore wind in the first place was the turbine failure that started washing up on the beach, and we didn't get who was responsible for it and how you're going to engage the committee, the companies and things like that. I still think that kind of emergency response is necessary. So I don't personally want to.
Especially since the two companies are pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah, and the other thing that kind of drove it was there was a potential landing site listed as Westport, but the group that had, they're permitting for New London, so it's not really, but certainly if there was a potential, if it came real again, that there was a landing site in Westport, then I think offshore wind would need to be engaged.
And that is listed for a 5-year policy, so that's till 2029 anyway.
2029 was the charge, yeah. The Public Safety Staffing Committee?
Well, I'm the chair of that, and we haven't met in a long time. I attempted to abolish it earlier, and I failed.
We can't just delegate it to the new guy.
Dick, what committees aren't you on?
But I'll make this,
Dick is
I'll
on
make
the
this simple for the
Eastern
select
State.
board here. Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sorry, go ahead.
I will speak with the police chief and the fire chief and query them, and they were not in favor of abolishing the committee 4 years ago or 5 years ago, but I think they probably have changed on this.
We've changed chiefs of police.
We changed chiefs of police. So I think,
We've been getting along well without it. So
let me just do that courtesy, and I'll report back, but I'm sure it'll be taken care of.
Okay. The Safety Regulation Board, so you said that's a bylaw?
So it's a bylaw. It's a group. I believe there's one board member, fence viewer, and the.
I am on the Safety Regulation Board.
There we go. Okay.
All about safety.
Regulations.
So
We never
yes,
met.
This is within the bylaw, so this is not something that we could act on, but it might be worth the board looking at this
For town meeting next year?
for town meeting next year.
Okay.
Okay. The Short-Term Rental Committee, so that was formed when we were trying to come up with the policy, and so the town meeting did pass the policy, but we have not created the policies yet, right?
Right.
Were you on that?
No, I was not.
No.
Is this one for like
The Airbnb.
accessory dwelling units? Yeah.
No, it was the Airbnb, the short-term rental.
Yeah, but that was, oh, yeah.
But the outcome of the town meeting was to task the select board with permitting short-term rentals, which we have not yet put in a
Right,
place
we
to
need
do.
we need to keep the committee
Yeah.
for that reason.
Here's my concern with this, why we need to keep it, is they just changed the tax code that they allow 100% depreciation recapture in your first year on a short-term rental. So there's a lot of people making short-term rentals just willy-nilly to get the depreciation.
Yeah, so I think that one might still have a role in that we still need to craft the policy.
So on that one, because we are going to be sending out the renewal notices for this upcoming year. So if that is a policy that we create along with the workflow, we can certainly get this committee's feedback on that proposed process and regulations. And then, again, if it serves a purpose next year, if we want to revisit this, we can certainly do that.
Okay. And then the tax incentive program committee?
I have no documentation on this.
I think we had one tip for Mid-City Steel. I don't even think we've had any others since then. Yeah, that one we can probably vote to dissolve. Were there any of here that the town administrator didn't recommend dissolving that you think we should consider dissolving?
So, I did my best, again, just going through the select board appointed committees. Again, identifying ones that were created under policy, really at the pleasure of the board. If these committees are serving a purpose and a value, my goal is to make sure that, I'm doing the best that I can working with them. So the ones that I highlighted, again, were ones that either haven't met or, as mentioned earlier, there was another committee could step in and potentially do the function. And really the only other one was the audit committee. And again, obviously there was a reason that it was established and the bylaw was created, which is understandable. But again, it was just the feedback and whether or not the board wanted to revisit it now that, there's staff in place.
So we'll vote specifically on those items in the next couple of meetings. I do think that everyone who's on a committee should kind of go look at, I think we should ask them to kind of reevaluate the charge. Do they know what we're asking them to do? And then we can evaluate that at future meetings, what we want them to do. Okay, anything else on that one? All right, so then we have the liaison assignments. So this is where we learn that we're on committees we didn't know we were on.
You're getting rid of a couple that I'm already on, so that's great.
Oh, we're lightening your load, are we, Jake? I like how you have two different names in here. You're Jake
I know.
sometimes
I'm bipolar, depending on which one I'm going to.
So I guess my first stop would be, do we have any that do not have a select board member? Because Mr. Soares was on some.
I think that's the ones that
He's got a lot of free time, though.
I think.
Well, he's no longer a select board member, so.
I think I took those over. Madam Chair, I just want to point something out to either Chris or Carla. The appointments that you have here, like the Climate Resiliency Committee, I sit on that committee as a member of the Conservation Commission, not as a select board member. Same thing with respect to, let me just see, Offshore Wind Committee. I'm on that as the conservation appointee, not the select board. And then obviously Conservation Commission, I'm on there as an appointment, not as a select board member. So those can either get removed.
Thank you. Yeah, when we pulled this report from the database, it
Yeah, it was a little confusing.
didn't parse out that way, but
Yep, and that's fine.
I'm just highlighting that here.
And that was the only changes I saw for myself. Thank you.
But the infrastructure, because Mr. Soares was on the Infrastructure Oversight
Yes.
Committee, but then we replaced him.
So I think I was appointed to the, Manny's role was, he sat on the Economic Development Task Force, the Infrastructure Oversight Committee, and the Safety Regulation Board, and I think I took all
You
three of
took all
those
three,
seats.
okay.
And outside of that, the TA Search Committee, obviously, unless Chris makes a decision here in the near future, we probably don't need that right now.
All right, so then I guess the question is, are there any that anybody particularly doesn't want, would like to switch off of, or any that anybody would particularly like to take on? I would like to stay on school building committee, because we have to end that project at some point soon. But I'm actually okay, and the Internet Advisory Board, we're going to dissolve, but Climate Resilience Committee, so Climate Resilience, there's about to have a report done. I think I should stay on that. I would like to stay on the Climate Resilience and the School Building Committee, but any of the others, like Rick, if you wanted to be, or Dick, if you want to take something, I'm fine with, or I can stay on them, they're fine.
Take ADA transition.
The one we're going to dissolve. Dick, are there any, you're on a lot.
Yeah, well, let me tell you what I want to do here, and first of all, we have to clarify a couple of things on this list. For example, the Commission on Disability, I'm on that unrelated to the Select Board needing somebody on that. I did that on my own, and you approved it. But you didn't require, and you don't require, a Select Board member on the Commission on Disability. I just point that out. That one stands alone.
There's no dedicated position for a select board
That's
member.
right.
Okay.
So I'm just there on my own wishes. The MBTA's Growth and Management Task Force. You got me there because I haven't been to one of those meetings. I don't know what it is. So you may want to double check that. I have no problem staying on it, obviously.
I don't even think we're considered an MBTA.
No, we're not.
We're not.
We are
I
not.
didn't think so.
So, I mean, we're borderline, we
Yeah.
get invited to the meetings, but we're not part of the, because we don't have
Correct.
real service in Westport.
Yeah, I think this is not necessary. The Open Space and Recreation, if I may move on, Madam Chair.
Yep.
That's the committee we're working on now to revise a number of things. Well, actually, it's the Open Space and Recreation Report of 2015. I was appointed to that, and we'll finish our work at some point in time this year, and it would probably be dissolved anyway. And it's a good committee to be on. Public Safety Staff, Railroad Commissioner really is just a title. I don't know what you want to do with that. Probably the town of Westport shouldn't retain that title anymore. It has no function. All of those Railroad Commissioner tasks, whatever they were, have been taken over by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. But it's kind of a cute little.
We do have railroad in Westport, though.
We do.
Yeah, we do. But I mean, you could just leave it anyway.
Did you get a hat? Did you ever get a hat?
I would love to.
No.
You're a pilot.
Rick really wants to be
Conductor now, too?
Yes.
Okay, the next one is CERTA. I can stay on that. Nobody else is going to be able to go to those meetings because they're on a Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. And you have to be retired to do this, so I will stay on that. And then you just recently put me on SERPED's Board of Directors. So that's okay. And some of these don't require a lot of work. But, however, I am liaison, a different kind of liaison, to Council on Aging and the Landing Commission. I enjoy both of those, but if somebody else is interested in doing that, and maybe it's good for the COA to have somebody else, or maybe the Landing Commission. But that's not an appointment, it's the role of liaison, which is a unique role that I've asked Chris what he thinks I should be really doing. And then lastly, this has nothing to do with any committee, but the signing of the warrants every 2 weeks, at some point, we ought to change that. I'm not lobbying hard for that, because I can fit it into my schedule, but I think two things here. One is, I wouldn't mind being the backup, and/or we should probably change our regulation, I think it's just a regulation of the Board of Selectmen, to where everybody can be a backup. So if I'm not there that day and the backup isn't there, and we had that happen once to us, if you recall, and one other Select Board member signed the warrants, but I think technically that was a violation because the authority was specific to the two people. So if everybody's a backup, then that we'll never have a problem there again. And it's very seldom you get called on.
We used to sign the warrant.
We used to all have to
Sign the
sign it.
warrant, but we didn't have to, they didn't need all of our signatures. If we got to 3, we were good to go.
Right.
But it did allow every select board member, if they wanted to, a chance to review the warrants, and,
Right, so now we have the warrant, you can review the warrants because they're in the packet, but this way only one person has to go to town hall.
yeah,
So
okay.
that's why, but I'm hearing you say you like to
Well,
You'd like to give
I'll
that to
keep doing
somebody
it.
else?
Yeah, if somebody else is so inclined, but I'll stay with the project. But I think it's a good idea, separate from that, to have everybody be a backup if needed be.
Yeah, I think, I agree.
All right, so let's put,
In some other meeting, we can do that.
let's put the authorization for signing of the bill warrant on like June 1 or June 22. Craig, I know you're really keen on the Affordable Housing Trust. Are there any that, and opioid, I think you've been very close to those.
Yeah.
So I guess, Rick, so for the ones that I'm on, that you could join if you wanted, or that I would be perfectly willing to give up, we have the Bike Walking Path Committee, the Offshore Wind Committee, and sick leave bank is really not a thing, but if you want one of those.
As a guy with 2 jobs and 4 kids almost, I'm gonna take whatever committee is I can do the most due diligence on, so probably irregular meetings, I don't know. Assign me one.
I could do the offshore wind.
I don't mind being on the offshore, and I'm just willing to give it up if somebody else wants it.
Okay.
All right, so
I'm willing to pull my weight as long as.
let's have Rick on the sick leave bank committee. There's hardly anything involved with that. And then, because that was me. And then, we have the TA search committee? We don't need that anymore.
Yeah,
That was from last year.
Yeah.
So these are just
Unless
the
it makes-
liaison appointments.
I think
Oh, so this.
Jake and I were on that committee.
Yeah.
We did a great job, and we're.
All right, well, everybody consider your, so Rick is, so I'll entertain a motion to appoint Rick as the select board representative to the sick leave bank committee.
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so Rick is now on the sick bank leave committee. If there's any that you want to shift to Rick, or Rick, if there's any that you want to talk to people about taking instead, look, we can change our minds later.
I love railroad commissioner. I'm gonna give that one up.
That's the one you got to go for.
Are you willing to give it up, or do we
Probably get a little hat and a badge.
arm wrestle?
It's a pilot.
I'm willing to give it up.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to appoint Rick Mundy, Railroad Commissioner.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Did you also know that we are police commissioners and water commissioners?
Really?
Yes, and cemetery commissioners.
I know about the cemetery.
Bristol County.
You're now 20% of the police.
Yeah,
commission.
I'm still on.
So it's like a left leg.
That's once a year.
All right, so anybody wants to change
Look at that
anything or
one. What's on
reconsider, we can take it up another.
Yeah, I think with the dissolution of committees, I think I'm down to 3, so I should be fine.
Yeah, and I think some, like climate resilience should be wrapping up, and the school building committee, please, should be wrapping up. So those are, I'd like to see those to the end. All right, town administrator 90-day update. So we passed on this the last time because we were getting late in the day, but maybe we've now had a month to look at his 90-day plans. So Chris, you want to give us some of the highlights?
I will certainly give the highlights, and I'm also watching the clock. So yes, I had prepared this for the last meeting. Within your packets, you have, I would say, my final deliverable from my initial 90-day plan, which is my key observations during the transition period. I reflect on my role in the 90 days, and really I guess the biggest item in here is the list of proposed actions for consideration to help the select board with its goal-setting discussion for FY 2027 and beyond. So just kind of going over on the next slide. My first 90 days, a lot happened. I met with the select board individually prior to starting, as well as the full board. I met with each department head as well as individual staff members throughout town hall and its buildings. We successfully passed the FY 2027 budget at town meeting. And as you mentioned earlier in the meeting, all of the warrants that were put forward passed. I helped manage the Blizzard of 2026 response. And we've started the work of increasing our outreach efforts online and through our website. So some themes and priorities you see within the report, there's 6 areas that I chose to focus in on. And within those areas, I have some initial priorities that I had put forward for consideration. So when you look at the report, some of these items are near-term, things that we've even talked about at tonight's meeting, as well as some longer-term initiatives. And, as I said before, this is intended to support the board's discussion, when we start thinking about, FY 2027 and some of those strategic goals. So the first section is infrastructure and capital. So, some of my initial observations are, there are a lot of active projects and projects that the town is looking to consider, but, we have to be mindful of ongoing capital needs. The various projects we have in town, they are a toll on staff time. And a lot of times there's some competing interests in terms of, what is the priority at any given time. And overall, when we look at projects across town, just a general need for better project tracking and prioritization. So some of the priorities that you see within the plan include improving our capital planning and prioritization efforts, developing a long-term facility strategy, enhancing our project tracking and overall communication to the community on these efforts, and as you just mentioned, completing the middle high school construction project closeout. So general government operations. So, here within town, we are very fortunate to have an experienced and committed workforce. Our town structure, it's very decentralized. There's a lot of processes that are very much at the departmental level. And I think that there is a general opportunity to provide some more clear and consistent support. The last thing I'll just say is, especially in certain departments more than others, our departments are pretty lean. And so I think as we go forward, like I said, standardizing our policies and procedures, improving coordination across the departments. We've started this, but evaluating our board and committee structures, as well as exploring some shared service opportunities are things that the board may wish to consider. Under financial management, so we say it all the time, but our budget is susceptible to budget pressures from inflation and the constraints of Proposition 2.5. The majority of our revenue comes from property taxes, and the town has, in the last several years, used one-time funds, free cash to support its operations. So, as has been said many times, there is a need for long-term financial planning. So some of the priorities, for this next year is working to develop a multi-year financial forecast and utilizing software, which we hope to begin implementing in FY 27 to improve the overall budget process for tracking departmental requests and the budgets that go before the board. As always, there's opportunities to expand our grant opportunities, and something that was started this past year, but I think should be considered, is continually evaluating our fees and revenues across the different permits and activities in town. For economic development, I think my biggest takeaway is there's a strong sense that Westport needs to preserve its community character. And, any new growth should be smart growth and compatible with the vision for the community. With economic development, limited new growth reduces our ability to generate additional revenue. And so, I think going forward, economic development is going to play a role in our long-term financial sustainability strategy. But that can take the form in a lot of different ways, and I think that's a continuing conversation as we go forward. One of the things, again, we're doing a lot with online permitting, but anything we can do to improve the permitting process and reducing the barriers to open and maintain a business here in town is something that we should strive for. working with our local business community and getting feedback about how we can make it easier to do business in town and support them. And lastly, updating the master plan. So this is something where the last major update was 2026 with a minor update during COVID. But this is something where.
2016, I think.
2016?
Yeah.
Yes, did I say that?
You said 26.
Oh, 2016, yes, with a minor update in 2021. But the master plan includes a chapter on economic development. So I think, through that planning process, we can hone in on maybe even more specific goals that we want to consider going forward.
Is that led by the planning department or?
That is,
Okay.
yes.
But they'll have a committee that someone could get appointed to from us.
Yes, and I'll just say the master plan is a very extended planning process with a lot of community input. It touches a lot of different areas, but it's a good complementary tool to the other plans that we have here in town. Moving on to communication and engagement. So, we have a community that's very engaged, which is fantastic. With that, there is the expectation, that we are communicating out on town activities through our various departments and operations. I'll note that some departments are better at getting their message out than others, and that's just, again, going to require some continued work. So, for priorities, improving outreach efforts and accessibility for the public, enhancing our website, which is new this past year, but enhancing it for user friendliness, and also putting more information online through our services. And as the board's previously discussed, evaluating and developing this communications role or this function to better serve this area. And my last area for organizational development, as I mentioned before, we have a very experienced workforce, a dedicated workforce, but something that has been said is additional staff support, whether that's through systems, software, or personnel. And one of the other things I will note is, in the next few years, we are anticipating some retirements, some people who have served us a many number of years, and who, will have a hard time replacing. So I think as we go forward, expanding our staff training and development, looking at succession planning and looking at, our staff today, standardizing our HR policies and processes, and improving our internal systems to better meet the needs of our staff is going to be critically important. And just my last slide, I want to thank the select board, the town staff, the members of the community for their patience with me. I want to give a special thank you to Carla and Paula of our select board office, who have been helping me throughout the transition process and educating me on the way things have been here within town. And I appreciate the input, and I look forward to working together on these goals. So thank you. And there's a discussion slide, but certainly leave it to you.
Just one area, but it covers two parts. So I'm looking at the capital items under infrastructure, and I like all of those goals: communicate, capital improvement plan enhancements, internal tracking, all good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As I read that, I said, well, maybe we ought to update the 5-year capital plan, and voila. And in section 4, you have 4.1, develop a multi-year financial forecast to guide long-term budgeting and capital planning decisions. So my question is, and we're into the third year, well, probably starting the fourth year of the 5-year plans, both of those plans. So we could update those or simply rebuild those according to these goals. But we probably ought to do something with them. We already have both plans.
Mm-hmm.
But do we want to scuttle them? And I'm not opposed to that. or you just revamp them or update them? I don't know, if you want to create, how much more work you want to create for yourself?
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that was supported here for town meeting was funded, was a new system to track and accept different capital requests, and tracking those expenditures. I think, obviously, the data information that we've collected to date will be very helpful, but in reviewing what we have on the books, there may be some additional things that we want to start tracking or start thinking about. One of the other things that we've discussed on prior occasions is our methodology for grading these different requests. I think ultimately, when we go through this exercise and that system's implemented, it's going to be challenging departments to start thinking about this, not just for, year 5, but also year 6, and knowing what we need to be able to make a decision so that these projects could be adequately considered and acted on. I think where this comes into play about the financial forecast is, a large part of our capital plan is obviously funded through free cash. And as you know, a lot of times there's more requests than there are dollars to support it. So I think one of the things is that doesn't necessarily mean that the need goes away. But I think, from the time that this gets on the CIPC's radar and the town's radar, it doesn't stop the discussion as to, all right, if not free cash or if not the funds on hand from the town, are there different, for example, grant opportunities that we could start to target, even if we're not planning for it this year? Maybe now this is on our radar, and now we can have the conversations about seeking those funds next year or the following year. And again, trying to identify where the best source of funds is to maximize the dollars. So I think what information we have, I think will be a good starting point. And then what we need will be, in collaboration with the CIPC and the board.
Okay.
Did you have more?
No, that works.
Okay. Any other comments? I know I've had conversations with Chris directly, but.
I have as well, but I think the communication aspect is key, and I think we started it tonight with the committee stuff, cleaning up those committees, getting the right committees online, because there are many committees that still aren't there in the membership list. So I think just that public engagement, that forward-facing stuff where people can actually find the stuff on the website. And I know in long-term, Shauna and I really think there should be, some sort of web individual that focuses more on the web. But I think that's going to be key, because that's what people see the most, and trying to find agendas and committee stuff. So that's great, and I think we start along that path today. So once we get that cleared up, we should be good.
Well, and I really appreciate the town Facebook page now, so that's good. I think, but I think that public information officer or the communication officer, and we saw that just with the fire, right? That who's supposed to be talking to who, and who should the reporters be talking to, and that kind of thing. I think that's another thing that I'm glad you see it on here. I think we've made some progress, but I think we've got to keep going. Right, anything else on that?
I think it's well-written, and I think that it's going to be a good measure of what our performance was a year or 2 years down the road in regards to how many of these goals have actually been met.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're on to the town administrator report. This will be more current.
Yes, and I know there was a few things that were discussed tonight, so I won't touch on those. Just to say thank you to everyone for a successful town meeting. If members of the Board of the Public have feedback with regards to the handouts or the informational session or the motions packet, I encourage you to reach out to my office so we can make it better for next year. So the next item I just wanted to touch on, the Mid-City scrap fire. So on May 4th, Westport police and fire personnel responded to a significant fire at Mid-City Scrap, which is located on State Road. This fire, due to the strong winds and the nature of it, also spread out into small fires within the adjacent wooded area, and it resulted in a large-scale mutual aid response. There were a number of agencies involved that helped us coordinate the fire suppression, evacuation planning, air monitoring, traffic management, and the ongoing site operations. Air monitoring conducted during that time was done by Mass DEP and the EPA, and they did not find elevated air quality readings in the surrounding community. Mass DEP continues to oversee the environmental review associated with the incident. On May 8th, Mass DEP issued a formal notice of responsibility to the owner of Mid-City Scrap, and they are requiring additional environmental assessment activities, including surface water sampling and evaluation of nearby private drinking water supply wells within 1,000 feet. So additional correspondence on that will be done through their contracted LSP. As I mentioned, that review is ongoing. Additional updates will be provided as more information becomes available. But from last week, I wanted to just take a moment and recognize our Fire Chief, Dan Baldwin, and our Director of Public Health, Matt Armendo, for their work on the incident, as well as their ongoing response, taking calls, responding to emails. They did a very good job.
Thank you, too, to all the other communities that participated. There was quite a large
Absolutely.
aid from other communities.
Yes.
Mutual aid, that was the word.
And I'll notify the board if any additional information comes out on that. The FY '27 cherry sheet estimate updates. The state continues to work on the budget process. Based off of what the Senate proposal came out with this past week, it's looking very favorable compared to what we have budgeted for. So we are continuing to monitor that. Harbor Master mentioned the oil spill drill this week, May 13th.
May 13th.
May 13th, yeah. I don't know what I said. So just an update on the parking fees. We did refer this to our police chief and town council, and we plan to have a report tentatively for that June 1 meeting with that information. The fire department received 2 grants totaling just under $10,000 to support life safety education programs for students and seniors. And just want to recognize our firefighter Anne Maureen Peckham for her continued efforts with this grant initiative. And lastly, at town meeting this past week, we launched a communications survey with the hope that we can gather feedback from residents, businesses, community members on how the town can improve communications and its public outreach efforts. So the survey link is on the town website, on the homepage. We encourage those watching to go and complete it. It should take just about 5 minutes. With that, thank you.
Thank you. All right, the minutes of April 27th.
I found no errors or omissions, and they look perfect.
So you are,
I make a motion to approve the minutes from April 27th, 2026.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. We have a report on the bill warrant.
It was $1.9 million last week. Everything was in order, and that doesn't need to be voted on, as we all know. So it's looking good.
Okay,
Everybody's doing a good job.
thank you. Select Board Committee reports or suggestions for future agenda items. Craig?
Well, I sort of gave the most important thing from the Affordable Housing Trust, but I think that the other 2 committees have not met since we last met. The opioid settlement and the long-term building committee.
I thank you. Dick?
Okay, this is important. So the audit committee met, and we spoke with town auditor Anthony Roselli. And as you know, when we're done with our drill, we have him present to you, the select board, either by Zoom or whatever it is. Sometimes he comes in person. So he's available either June 1st or June 22nd. We could have him in or Zoomed in to make his report, as we usually do. I'll leave it up to either one, but let us know. And I'm continuing working on the Open Space and Recreation Committee. That's where we're revising the plan. Ross Moran, who was here earlier, he's instrumental in that, and Dana Stewart, so that's going along very nicely. That's it.
All right, thank you. Jake?
I think the only update we had was offshore wind. We covered a little bit. We're probably going to obviously address the charter and what our goal is with respect to that. We'll be having a meeting in August, but then after that point, we'll be meeting in February and August of every year. That was the only update I had.
We also attend the Climate Resilience
Oh,
Committee.
well, I was going to allow you. You're the select board appointee. I'm a conservation appointee.
The Climate Resilience Committee continues to work on finalizing the report. The committee, it's coming along pretty nicely, actually. Just trying to, they had different working committees working on stuff, and now they're trying to conglomerate into one report, so it's just trying to make it all have the same voice and that kind of thing. I was also attending the Offshore Wind Committee meeting, and then there was a school building committee meeting, which I attended about half of. Kind of the news out of that is that Bond Council has recommended that we stop spending money until we think we have about $1.2 million available still on the project. We're not overspent. But the way that the reimbursements work, we actually have over borrowed while we're waiting for the reimbursements to come back. And so Bond Council has advised that we don't take up any new spending until we've kind of resolved all that, right? So we want to make sure that we definitely have not gone over budget, but we're on the edge, right? We used projected amounts for expected reimbursements from the state. But we haven't got, and we assumed that they were 50% of what we submitted would be reimbursed, but we want to make sure there's a buffer in case they don't reimburse 50%. They've recommended no new spending. The committee did vote to spend more money, but it was a couple of things that we had already voted to move forward with, and so the work had already been done, so we paid the invoices. So the gist of that is we are trying to wind down, so stop any further spending. There was conversation at a previous school building committee about building a road through the campground, but, Bond Council is like, no, that's not part of the original project, and also see above where you shouldn't be spending any more money until it's all worked out. So we're definitely not over budget, but we're definitely running out of money, so, and also just need to, we've been in the building 5 years, we just need to close the project. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. So there are some ongoing projects that if they probably don't get fixed, we may have more costly issues in the long run. I know there's some issues with the fields I heard about or saw on the meeting with irrigation and stuff like that. So how is that going to be addressed? Because if you lose the fields, is it going to cost us $250,000 to fix as opposed to the $75,000?
So the committee has taken a few tries at that, right? So one is if it's warranty work, we need to review and get it done through the warranty, right? The second is I think it's the roof project, but there's still some discussion between the OPM and the architect and the general contractor that hasn't been finally resolved. So we're trying to get the appropriate, like if it's a warranty defect, we need to get them. If it was a architectural flaw, then we need to get them to redress it. But we're really at the end of almost all of that. So we're really at the point now where if something needs to be fixed, it's on us now. It's part of the capital improvement. It'd be part of the capital plan. Obviously, you try to exhaust your legal measure, but I know for the roof particularly, they've been looking at that for a couple of years.
Everyone's
now,
pointing fingers at
right?
each other.
Like everybody's pointing fingers at everybody else, and at a certain point, it's unlikely that we'd be reimbursed for anything from the MSBA at this point because we've been occupying the building for 5 years, right? And so it should have been closed out a couple of years ago, and so we're unlikely to get any reimbursement for anything. So it would have to just go on the regular capital plan. I thought I had another one. All right, so that's it for me. We do have 2 items that are under the not anticipated 48 hours in advance. The first one is who asked us to weigh in on this? Is Steve or
Rep. Olette's office.
So as Representative Willett asked us, there is, before the State House, in the State House at some part of the process, the Buzzards Bay Coalition is entering into an agreement with the DCR about the use of a building on the State Beach property. We don't have any authority or control over what happens on the state, it's like between the DCR and the Buzzards Bay Coalition, but Representative Willett wanted to know if we wanted to weigh in on it. I think they're going to use it for Gnome Surf is one of them. They're going to use for Gnome Surf, and then there's some other charitable organization that they want to just use. I think it's a vacant building that's already there. They're just changing the use. So I don't think we need to make a decision about it, but if anybody has any questions, certainly contact Representative Willett if you have any comments on that one. Yep.
That's Horseneck Beach, right?
Yeah, it's a building at Horseneck Beach.
Yeah, we had a piece of paper on that in the package.
Yeah, saw it in the package.
Correspondence or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was their email to us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was not our purview.
Yeah, I don't think it's our purview either, but I didn't want to just like decide that.
My
I don't
concern
know
is
if
we
it's how you want.
tiptoe in, we might end up owning a piece of it.
We might, but anyway, if you want to weigh in, contact Representative Willett. The other one is Representative Willett is working with council at the State House to evaluate beach pass violation fees, parking tickets for beach passes.
All right.
So the parking tickets of beach passes are a state law. That's why we can't just decide to increase them the way we did with the Landing Commission. He is looking at filing a home rule petition to increase the fee. He suggested $100. I suggested $200 since that's what we just made the landing. So he's looking for input on that one too. I assumed this board would be favorable to him increasing the fees, but if you have comment on what you want that to be, maybe send to Representative Willett.
Okay. Just a question on that, and Chris, does this impact the overflow boat ramp that we were talking about as well, or no? Is it different?
I believe it will. However, I did just touch base with Shauna before this meeting, and I'm going to see if Rep. Olet will connect with council. Because again, he's preparing this information, so.
But they're not consistent right now. It's what, $25 at the boat ramp, and I think it's $50 for the Cherry and Webb for a ticket? I was told.
I think it's 50.
Okay, so they're not consistent as it is. So there must
Yeah.
be different. They're different anyway. They're different,
Mechanisms.
pertain to different things. So
Yeah.
Listen, I am all in favor, and I think everyone. I had someone at town meeting come out and they said, "Oh, it should be $500 for overnight." And I'm like, "Oh, okay," but
When I told Steve, I think it should make 200 since town meeting just passed the
Yeah.
landing at 200, he's like, oh, but then you're going to get a lot of appeals. I'm like, I don't care.
That's fine.
Appeal.
But again, that sets a precedent, and people will not want to get a $200 ticket. So once it happens to one or two people, word gets out, especially if they're non-residents, right? I mean, as we discussed at town meeting, there will be situations where a town resident maybe forgot their sticker, hang tag, that'll be taken care of. But I'm all in for the $200 on that too.
I'm in for 500.
Feel free to contact Representative Willett with your opinions on that.
I do have one thing for unanticipated. So I was contacted by the governor's office to participate in the state's commission for pilot payments. I know that, and unsolicited, but I think they're trying to get input from a lot of different voices. One of those includes someone from the municipal space. This is a state appointment, so I wanted to just, before I responded or made any type of commitment there, I just wanted to get the board's take on that.
I think it would be a great idea, because we benefit greatly from the Horseneck Beach Reservation pilot payment to the town.
And when they cut it,
Yeah.
it hurt us dramatically.
Yes, yes. In other words, I mean, I think it's good.
Yeah.
And eminently in our self-interest.
Yeah, I'll know it's an advisory committee, so it's just recommendations that are put forward. My goal is to try and provide a neutral response, but obviously leaning towards what municipal factors come into play when it comes to these payments, so.
The revenue from Horseneck used to be a lot more when it was maintained better, but that's also a state issue. Sorry.
Okay, any other topics? All right, is there any comments or statements from the public? We have public that lasted through a 3-hour meeting. Good job, gentlemen. We usually not have people at this point. Is there anything else before we close? Jake?
I am all set. Thank you, Madam
No?
Chair.
You want to make a motion?
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.